Welcome to the pre-show, everybody. It's the pre-show for today's 220-1001 A+ study group. It's Core 1 study group. Hello, chat room. Hi, everybody. I've just been here kind of getting things ready to go, trying to get things all set up. I think we're in pretty good shape. Are we recording? We're recording down here. We're recording over here. We're switching up here. Got a lot going on. There's a lot of things up here now. Hi, chat room. Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Make yourself comfortable. We'll get started in about 9 minutes. We will start the study group. This is the pre-show. This is not the actual show. I had people send me emails saying that first part's just really boring, so I turned it off. Well, he turned it off before we started doing things. So stick around. Or fast forward if you're watching this in the replay. You can do that too. Oh, welcome everybody. Mike in the chat room passed Network Plus with an 812. Congratulations on your new Network Plus certification. Nice score too. Folks checking in the chat room from Texas, from Kansas, from Houston, which is also in Texas. Bolivia is here, again in Texas. More Texas. Do not mess with them. They are in the chat room. Mexico's here. Welcome. New York. Welcome. Good to have you here. Another Texas. What's the deal with Texas? Okay. It's getting kind of weird now for that. What's going on? California, Oklahoma, Denver, Fort Worth, again, Texas. Nolans, welcome. Glad you made it through all that. There in Louisiana. Scala. Good to have you here. Thanks for being here. There's Iowa and Miami and London, Italy. Another Florida, welcome. Ohio, more Florida, Nepal, Mesquite, Texas, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Miami, welcome Miami, Tacoma, Washington. There's BC. What's up, Canada? I'll let Mrs. Professor know you checked in. There's Philly, London, Virginia. Atlanta's here. Mississippi, Jersey's here. Iowa, did I miss Iowa? Lauderdale's here. France, Afghanistan, New York, Brooklyn. Got a lot of people checking in. Thanks for being here. It's going by so fast, I can't even keep up anymore with all of those. Just zooms by at this point. But Austin, South Carolina, and Richmond, and Hawaii, and Houston, and South Africa, and Las Vegas, East Las Vegas, in Nevada. Ohio, India, a lot of folks in. Thanks for being here. We're doing all Core 1 today. Core 1, Core 1, Core 1. I wrote these questions over the weekend, so I sort of remember them, but I wrote Core 1 and Core 2 study group content over, I think it was actually Friday and Saturday. So it's even farther away in the very distant past, way back in the day. Was that 4 days ago? Can't remember a thing. Just have no idea what that was, but we will figure it out together. So we'll have all the details for you as we get going. What else is the reason I can't remember is because since then I've been doing Security Plus. Security Plus is the current refresh that's going on. So when I create these courses, I build the entire course before I start shooting one video. So it's an entire set of content that gets written. And the new Security Plus is enormous. It was already the biggest single exam CompTIA had. Now it's 30% bigger. 30% bigger. So it's even larger. I'd be done with it by now had it not been expanded into its current size. So I'm almost finished. We're getting through it, but it takes up all the cycles in my brain because half of the content is 30% bigger and 50% of the content is new, brand new. Usually when you go from version to version in these exams, it's usually 20% different. But Security Plus, for some reason, last time was about 50%, 40 to 50%. This time is 50% different. And that's why if you are someone who is studying for Security Plus right now, you'll notice that The new exam is supposed to be out this month. It's not out quite yet, at least not that I can see. But it will be out in November, they say, which is this month. And there's not a lot of books available. In fact, there are no books available. The first published books from a big publisher will probably be out in January. Others come out in March. You know, this is months away from when the exam is available, but that's pretty normal. That's just a normal thing. You can now see the switcher is up here. So I can't hide from you anymore. Now my video switcher is down. In fact, I could even bring it further down, which may not be a bad idea for the next one. But now you can see the preview, the head cam, which is what that says there, head cam, because that's my head. That's what the cam is called. And then there's an aux display. That is being sent to my video recorder. These two at the bottom, that's the streamer. That's the bird cam, I call it, because it's up. That's what you're seeing right now is the bird cam, because it's up there like a bird looking over my shoulder. And then you can't see very well the preview and the program at the very top of that. But that's sort of new to have that. It was a much larger television that was behind everything, but now I've moved it to be connected to the desk. So everything is closer to me now. What's nice about it is it clears out things. You can't see back there. It just looks like darkness. And right now it is just darkness, but now it's very clear. It's cleared out. So I can walk around back there and run cables and actually move around my studio now, which was difficult to do when there was a big television there. It was on a stand. You could roll the stand around, but it was just clunky. It was like a 50-inch television. This is much more compact, 27-inch monitor, still 4K, but very nice to have that there. I still haven't hooked everything up with that yet. I want to hook that up to my matrix switch that I have for all the video, because I can adjust where video goes on a matrix switch so I can send it to multiple outputs. I can have many inputs. I can send data wherever I want in here for both audio and video, but that is not yet on the matrix. But I've got, you can't see it, but over behind the mixer, where is it? Let me grab it. Behind the mixer is this converter. Everything is in here runs on coax. It's called SDI, serial something. SDI. You use these abbreviations so much you forget what they're actually called. SDI is a video and audio packetized format that is commonly sent over coax. So you can see these big BNC connectors on the end of this converter. And I have the coax that comes into that. And on the other side is HDMI right there. There's the HDMI. So this converts from the SDI coax into HDMI on the other side. And that's what I have to plug in and hook up to this monitor here so that it can be part of the whole matrix switched SDI video setup. So that's what that's about. So there's a little story. You got a little behind the scenes inside baseball on that one. My electric bill, not as high as you would think. Everything here is LED. The lights, which you can't see, but that's why this looks bright, because it is bright. It's all pointing at me. Those are all LEDs. You know, it's LED, LED, LED. So that's what that is. We could probably pause that screen. There we go. Everything else is, and some of these things aren't on all the time. The video switcher isn't on normally during the day, nor is this separate monitor. So both of these monitors are never on unless I'm live. The iPad's usually in front of me. The monitor, the laptop is not really there. So that's it. That's the difference. Can I tell the difference between the 1080p and the 4K on the 27-inch monitor? Probably not. But I knew that I would want to output 4K to it. Serial digital interface. Is it that easy? Okay, that's what SDI is. Thank you, chat room. Chat room's awesome. Can I tell the difference? Not on a 27-inch monitor, probably not very well, at least not for normal movies and things like that. But since we are publishing things here in 4K, it really does need to be 4K so I can really see what it's going to look like. Anyway, the reason that clock screen there, so that I know when it's 12 o'clock and it's in front of me and in my face, so that we can do a live stream. I'm already seconds behind. Had I been ready to go, we would have gotten this green light right there. That looks good. everything now. Ready to go. Let's do a live stream, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November 2020 Professor Messer Core 1 A+ study group. That's for the 220-1001 A+ study group, coming to you live from our headquarters here at Messer Studios. Thanks for joining us. If you're watching this live, I'm going to ask you questions live. You're going to answer the questions live on the internet. I'll tell you how all that works in just a moment. If you're watching on the replay, you won't be able to have the interactive part of this, but you can still answer the questions. You can still follow along with what we're doing, and you'll be able to see all of those things as we go. If you're here live and would like to participate, I ask these questions on the internet using this service called Socrative. So you will want to browse, pop open a new browser window, go to professormesser.com/QA. professormesser.com/QA. It'll pop you open to a window. I've also got a QR code here, so you can do that if you've got a separate device. You can find that pretty easily. There's also an app you can get for this. Everybody needs an app, and there's one for this as well. The app is called the Socrative Student app. The Socrative Student app. Download that. It will ask you for a room name. That room name is Professor Messer, all one word. Make sure you spell it right, PROFESSORMESSER. And if you do all of that correctly, there will be a question waiting for you. We call this our rewind question because it's a question from last month. So this is just to see if we can get in, answer the questions, make sure everything's working the way we would expect. The question you will find asks, what type of memory is commonly found on a DIMM? Is it ROM? Is it SD-RAM? Is it cache? Is it SRAM? Or is it non-volatile? Lock in your answers by going to professormesser.com/QA. Lock in your answer. We will come back to this question in just a moment. Stand by. I'll give you all the answers so we can figure out these details. Well, thanks for being here on the study group. There is a study group for A+, Network+, Security+. We do study groups all the time throughout the month. And that is one of those situations where whenever you're working through all of this, you can always find us on these social media sites. Just type in professormesser.com/YouTube/Twitter/Instagram. All of these are available, and even other things. You want to find me on LinkedIn? Go to professormesser.com/LinkedIn. Want to find me on Facebook? professormesser.com/Facebook. You see how it works. We also have our daily pop quiz questions for A+ out on Instagram. That's a fun link because there's also a nice pretty picture to go along with it at professormesser.com/Instagram. I also give you a continuing education unit credit on this. You get 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. If you don't know what that is, then it doesn't matter to you. If you do know what this is, then it matters. That doesn't make a lot of sense when I say it that way, but that's how it works out. You can go to or listen in sometimes during this first hour, and I will describe to you the process of me sending you an email that has this CEU content in it. So stick around in this first hour. Listen out for that. I will explain the entire process there for you to figure out all those details. So what you want to be able to do is know that we're going to talk about the 220-1001 today. This is an exam that was released in January of last year. We probably would expect this exam to be retired somewhere in July of 2022. And it might also be after that. July of 2022. So the point, though, if you're studying here in November of 2020, you have plenty of time to study. This exam is not changing or going away anytime soon. You are studying the right content as long as you're studying for content that is specifically labeled for the 220-1001 and the 220-1002. The exam is 90 minutes. You have to pass both the 220-1001 and the 220-1002 to be A+ certified. You can't just take one of them. You have to take both. And for the 1001, you need to earn a 675 on a scale from 100 to 900. Now, for those of you that were taking or studying for an earlier version of this exam, it was the 220.901. In the 1001, there's about 21% of its new topics. So don't study with old content. It's really the moral of that story. Don't study from old books. You're not going to have all the information you need to be able to pass the exam. Make sure all your study materials specifically state that they are for the 220-1001 and the 220-1002. Today, we're going to talk about topics from the 1001 exam. Check back. This is a Tuesday. Check back on Thursday. We're going to do the 1002. So today is all about mobile devices. It's about networking. It's about hardware. It's about virtualization and cloud computing. And it's about hardware and network troubleshooting. So there is plenty to talk about in all 5 of those different domains, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. For those of you that have watched my videos, every minute of all of my videos is available for you to watch online for free. There's no registration. There's no paywall. There's nothing special you have to do. There, you simply click on them and watch them. It could not be easier than that. Some of you would like offline versions of this. You maybe would like my course notes. You might be interested in my practice exams. You might want to go through my Exam Hacks ebook. I bundle all of these things together into my Success Bundle. You can find that on my website at professormesser.com/1001success. There is also some Q&A that is free on my website. Don't forget about my Take 10 Challenge. These are 10-question practice exams for A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. Have a look at those. You can find them at professormesser.com/take10. It's a great place to go to get some free extra questions for this. I also have a replay of this study group available immediately afterwards on YouTube. There's also an audio-only podcast version of this available at professormesser.com/podcast. You'll find podcasts there for the A+, the Network Plus, and my Security Plus study groups. You can add them to your podcast listening program. They'll download automatically. I usually will put them online usually later in the day after we do one of these study groups. So they're usually available pretty quick to be able to make that happen. Also want to let you know that if you're watching this video replay of this, you can look at the YouTube video description, and you'll notice there are timestamps there, thanks to my marketing manager, Lori. Hi, Lori. Hi, chat room. Say hi to Lori. She is watching the replay of this and putting in all of these timestamps for you, so you can go back years in these study groups and simply click on exactly what you're looking for in the timestamps. She has to listen to this whole thing and put these timestamps in. Thank you, Lori, for doing this. It really does help out a lot of people to have that there. Let's also talk about other pieces that are available on my website, the course notes. I'll talk more about those later on in the study group, but another thing to look at on my website at professormesser.com/1001 notes. Let's jump into that question I just asked. A lot of you are saying that sounds familiar, this question. It's because it's our rewind question. The first question of every month is a question we did last month. So all the rest of the questions are brand new. What type of memory is commonly found on a DIMM? Is it ROM, SD-RAM, cache, SRAM, or non-volatile? 74% of you say it's SD-RAM, synchronous, dynamic, random access memory. In fact, SD-RAM is the right answer. Synchronous DRAM, if you will. It's a synchronous because it's synchronized with the system clock. So all of the information is being sent to and from these particular memory modules on the same clock speeds or the same clock rates or a multiple of those clock rates as the system clock of the system. So plenty to look at there. SD-RAM is the right answer. That is a DIMM right there. That is the memory module that you will probably find on most desktop systems. You know, it's a pretty big memory module these days when you consider the small devices that we often use. But that SD-RAM is what those memory modules are. These memory chips that are on the DIMM are SD-RAM chips. That's what those are. So that is the right answer. 75% of you did get that one right. SD-RAM was the right answer. It's not read-only memory. It's not cache memory. Usually find that on the motherboard or the chip, the CPU itself. It's not static RAM, and it's not non-volatile RAM. It's very volatile RAM. SD-RAM is the only possible answer here. So if you answered B on that one, you got that one absolutely right. What a good start. 75% of you right off the bat getting the right answer. You're right there. Well done. Let's now have a look at some of the other questions I have for you. One of the things you will notice, or you've already probably become accustomed to if you've attended any of these study groups in the past, is our first new question of the month is a performance-based question. Now, if you've not taken a CompTIA exam before, the first handful of questions you get on your exam are not multiple choice questions. Multiple choice is just like the one we did, where you have a question and there's multiple choices available to answer. And in this answer, for example, you had a 20% chance of getting it right if you simply guessed. So there's always a chance you would have gotten it right. But what CompTIA does on their exam is they give you questions at the beginning that are not multiple choice. So you have to be able to answer these questions and really know the topics behind it, because you don't always have the luxury of a multiple choice. Now, in this particular question that I've made for you, it's sort of a multiple choice, multiple answer kind of question. So let's step through this one and see how you do with this month's performance-based question. This question is kind of a pick the one that makes sense from this list. I have for you 5 different wireless technologies: 802.11a, 802.11b, G, N, and AC. And for each of those, I have a frequency category, a MIMO category, and a per stream maximum theoretical throughput category. And I want you, from each one of these lines, each one of those standards, pick what it happens to be. See if you can figure out that detail. What does it happen to be? So for 802.11a, pick the frequency 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz. For 802.11a, pick MIMO. Is it none, MIMO, or MU MIMO? Whatever that is. And then for a per stream maximum theoretical throughput, is it 11, 54, 150, or 867 megabits per second? And then do that for all 5 of those standards: 802.11a, .b, .g, .n, .ac. Go through all of those and see if you happen to know what each one of them is. There's only one option that you need to choose in each category. So for the frequency category, just choose one of them. For the MIMO category, just choose one of them. For the per stream maximum theoretical throughput, just choose one of them for each one of those standards. And you should be able to pick out which one those are for each individual standard. You may get some questions on your exam that ask you some details about these technical topics, these technical standards. There is not a lot of IEEE standards on the exam, but IEEE standards you will always find on these exams are the wireless standards. And that's why you'll start to see that the 802.11a, b, g, n, and ac would be the ones that you would have to work through. Hopefully that can help you as you're stepping through this. See if you happen to remember what those are. And some of you are thinking that's an odd way to present the question. You will find the performance-based questions on the exam may seem a little odd. They may be drag and drop. They may be using a pull-down menu. I obviously can't do a pull-down menu in this view, but it's one where you should be able to at least parse them out. And we will do them one at a time so you can see how all of these works. I think it's easier than a fill in the blank. At least you have some options here. It'd be awful if I just said fill in the blank. What's the frequency, the type of MIMO, and the throughput for each one of these? And then you'd really have to know your standards. Maybe you'll be able to pick out what it is and is not based on the options that are available. That might help you a little bit as we go through this. Maybe that can help you. So a number of you are putting in what you think the answers to be. This one's taking a little bit longer than normal to figure out these details. So pick the one answer from each one of these categories that you think it happens to be. You know, some of these, I put at least every possible answer. So you won't leave any of these blank. There's an answer on each one of these particular lines on each one of these categories. So that might help you as you go through this, is that you're not going to leave it blank. You're going to choose something. That's also kind of a good policy for your exam, by the way, is never leave anything blank on your exam. Always take a guess. What we do know of the exam grading is that you are not penalized for a wrong answer. You obviously don't earn any points if it's a wrong answer, but they don't take points away from you if it's a wrong answer. So it doesn't hurt to guess. It costs you nothing to take a guess. Always leave it open. Let's step through each one of these and see how you did with this one. We're going to start with the first category. We're looking at 802.11a. Its frequency. Is it MIMO or is it not MIMO? And what type of MIMO is it? the multiple input, multiple output. And then what is the per stream maximum theoretical throughput? For A, that is a 5 gigahertz technology. It does not use any type of multiple input, multiple output technology. And the per stream maximum theoretical throughput for 802.11a is 54 megabits per second. When that came out the same time as B. 802.11a and 802.11b were released at the same time, and a lot of people wanted A because 802.11a was so much faster than 802.11b. 802.11b ran at 11 megabits per second. For that, it was a 2.4 gigahertz frequency technology. It also did not use any type of multiple input, multiple output. So these two technologies came out exactly the same time. And people are trying to decide, what do we use here? 802.11a, a little bit more expensive, it seemed. The different products were. 802.11b, it seemed that there was less expense involved in making these lower frequency technology products. And so it seemed that 802.11b caught on faster. It's kind of odd how that happened. What we found, though, is once 802.11g came around, we kept the 2.4 gigahertz technology, still didn't have MIMO yet. MIMO is so useful to have that, but it did increase the speeds up to 54 megabits per second. Now, the differences here have nothing to do with the frequencies. You can see that we were able to get up to 54 megabits per second, but the type of signaling we were using was very different between those. Obviously, 5 gigahertz and 2.4 gigahertz, those frequency ranges, they act very differently in different environments. 2.4 gigahertz tends to be absorbed more than 5 gigahertz, which tends to bounce around more. So it was very interesting how it was implemented. We saw a lot of warehouses using A because you didn't have to worry about anything being bounced around. It was a big open area. So 802.11b, 2.4 gigahertz, we saw in a lot of other places. So very useful to have that there. Let's 802.11g, though, 2.4 gigahertz, basically an upgrade to B, no MIMO, and it did run at 54 megabits per second. So let's now take the next one on our list, 802.11n, and we're changing things up a bit. 802.11n standard supports both 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz standards. So you can see that particular standard running at either one of those. This did start to use multiple input, multiple output, which allowed the technology to use multiple streams to communicate to multiple devices simultaneously over the same frequencies, which was interesting in itself. I have some nice graphics in my wireless technology video that describes that. And the per stream maximum theoretical throughput, a big jump up to 150 megabits per second. But if you thought that was fast, you need to be looking at 802.11ac, a technology that only operates at 5 gigahertz. You may find that you have some access points out there that say they are AC access points that are dual band. They will also do 2.4 gigahertz, but what they're really doing is 802.11n for the 2.4 gigahertz and 802.11ac for the 5 gigahertz, because there's only 5 gigahertz standard listed in the 802.11ac standard. It supports a different type of multiple input, multiple output called multi-user multiple input, multiple output, where you can communicate to multiple users simultaneously over the same frequency at the same time. It's kind of a mind bender, isn't it? How do you communicate to multiple devices over the same frequencies at the same time? Well, it's part of multi-user MIMO. So that's how you do it. The physics involved in it are a little beyond the scope of the A+ exam, but it's a very unique technology that does rely on bouncing the signal around and being able to communicate over these multiple radios, multiple devices, all at the same time. Its per stream maximum theoretical throughput, just under 867 megabits per second. You have multiple of those streams, and you've really got some high-speed wireless networking that you can do. So those are the 5 standards you need to know for your A+ 802.11 A, B, G, N, and AC. So make sure you're aware of those. For those of you in the chat room wondering, what if you got partial credit? What if you got some of this right and some of this wrong? Part of the problem that CompTIA, with their grading systems, they don't tell you about their grading system. In fact, they have specifically said in the frequently asked questions on their website, they could give you partial credit. they could also not give you partial credit. They literally say that in the frequently asked questions, is they might or might not provide that. So the answer is you never know, because they're not going to tell you. And you can't tell based on the final score, because they don't break it out by the question that you got. So my recommendation for you is to just do as well as you can. Just try to get everything right, and the final score is going to be whatever it's going to be. So hopefully you did pretty good with those categories. If you wanted more information on this, all of this information is from 802.11 Networking, the section 2.4, the video entitled 802.11 Wireless Standards, where I step through each one of those, where you can learn more about the network standards and what you can do with all of those. So that's something you can always look at to be able to figure out what you might want to reference on wireless networks. So there's your performance-based question of the month. Let's now shift gears a little bit into a multiple choice-based question. Then at least you have a 25 to 20% chance, depending on what the answer might be. So here is the next question on our list that asks, a system administrator has installed an operating system, database software, and web server software on a cloud-based system. Which of the following would best describe this cloud model? Would it be SaaS, private, IaaS, hybrid, or PaaS, P-A-A-S? A system administrator has installed an operating system, database software, and web server software on a cloud-based system. Which of the following would best describe this cloud model? Would it be SaaS, private, IaaS, hybrid, or PaaS? If you think you know the answer, do not answer in the chat room. You want to answer at this link right here, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. Cloud-based technologies is an entire domain on the exam. There's not a lot of topics, but there's a relatively large percentage of the exam is cloud-based topics, even though a relatively small number of the total number of exam objectives is so small, relatively speaking. So you seem to get a lot of cloud-based questions on the exam, but the reality is there's not a lot to pull from. You'll get a lot of those to be able to have that there. But it is a chock full of information domain. The cloud-based technologies, a lot to learn in that particular domain. So make sure you're familiar with everything listed in that section 4 of the exam objectives. That's another one that you really, really, really need to know. And if you think you are stumbling through that, you're going to get even more of it on Network Plus and a whole lot of it on Security Plus. So make sure you become more familiar with these cloud technologies. They're here to stay. They're everywhere. It's what we're using now. We're just expanding on the cloud at this point. We're very much expanding on cloud technologies at this point. You should absolutely know these different models, how they work. You're going to be in meetings. People are going to ask you about them. You need to understand the parlance, the nomenclature, the terminology of all of these, the cornucopia of the plethora of things to know. All of these different abbreviations and terms, we just use them all the time. So make sure you're familiar with this. Cloud-based technologies are an important thing to know. A number of you have answered this one. Let's see how you did. A system administrator has installed an operating system, database software, and web server software on a cloud-based system. Which of the following would best describe this cloud model? Is it SaaS, private, IaaS, hybrid, or PaaS? How did we do? We're very torn. We're just not sure. 42% of us, and not a majority, but a plurality, have said it is IaaS, infrastructure as a service. 26% say it's software as a service. 22% say it's platform as a service. Now, only 9% said hybrid, only 3% said private. Let's throw out those single-digit responses. So this is really between infrastructure, software, and platform as a service for those. Well, if you are an administrator and you're installing the operating system, you're installing the database software, you're installing the web server software, you're installing everything. You're installing from the top to the bottom. You're installing everything you would need to get this running. You're effectively building the entire infrastructure to make this happen. which means this would be infrastructure as a service. Sometimes you might see this written out as hardware as a service, HAAS, but more commonly I see infrastructure as a service. Although these days we just put as a service after everything. Gaming as a service, coffee as a service, everything you would want to do, filling your car up with fuel as a service, everything they do. But this one is very clear about what you would put into this list. Infrastructure as a service just assumes they're giving you the bare minimum of everything. They're giving you memory, they're giving you storage, they're giving you a CPU, they're giving you a network, and then it's up to you to make everything else work. That is one that becomes very useful. So you're responsible for the operating system. You're responsible for the application, for the web server, for the database server, for everything. This is very commonly done with web server providers. So if anything goes wrong, you're also the one that has to manage it. Very different than something like software as a service. Software as a service, you don't do any of that. You don't install the operating system. Software as a service, a good example is one that like Google Mail is software as a service. I never installed an operating system to get Google Mail working. I don't manage the database on the back end of Google Mail, thankfully. I don't have to worry about installing a web server software to access Google Mail. I just go to my browser and say, show me my Google Mail. It does everything else. That would be software as a service. And lastly, platform as a service, kind of the one that came in third place there. Platform as a service is for people who are building their own applications. They might be working on a platform that gives you all the building blocks you need, and then you're using their building blocks to put together the application that you would want to build and have available. That would be platform as a service. So in this particular case, when you're starting from nothing and you're the one building the entire thing up, you're creating your own infrastructure. That is infrastructure as a service. If you answered C, IaaS, you got that one absolutely right. Well done to 42% of you. Make sure you know about those cloud-based topics. Those are going to be very important for you on the exam. Let's do another question. The next on my list asks, a computer has been delivered to the help desk with a note that says, post failed. Which of the following would be the most likely cause of this issue? Would it be a bad RAM module? Would it be a malware infection? Would it be an incorrect video driver? Would it be a printer not connected? Or would it be a failed Windows update? A computer has been delivered to the help desk with a note that says post failed. Which of the following would be the most likely cause of this issue? Is it a bad RAM module, a malware infection, an incorrect video driver, a printer not connected, or a failed Windows update? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. We'll be able to step through this as if we were sitting for the exam ourselves and figuring it out. This might be one you can work through to be able to have that happen. See if you know the answer to this one. Lock it in. And if you don't know it, take a guess. Always take a guess on this one. It might help you as you go through this, figuring out the details. Lock in your answer, professormesser.com/QA. One of the things in this exam that becomes really, really useful to know is what all of these abbreviations are. If you look at the exam objectives, there are pages and pages of these abbreviations in it. And people ask me all the time, do I need to know all of these? Well, to some perspective, you do need to know all of these. Being able to understand the abbreviations helps us understand the context for these. So don't necessarily concentrate on what the letters represent. You need to instead understand what the abbreviation means in the context of a larger scope. So this is a good example where it says post failed. Post is in all capital letters. That's your clue in this one. I'm kind of giving you a little bit of the answer. So you need to know what post means, but you don't necessarily need to know what that set of abbreviations is. You sort of need to understand what a post is, what it does, how it works, what is important about a post, so that you can then answer the question, the possible answers that are there. Becomes very useful. And maybe if you do know what they stand for, maybe you do know what post stands for, That might help you answer some of the question, but I don't think it will give you exactly the right answer. So there's a little bit more to this question, and that's very common on the exam, is it tends to ask you a little bit more about this. Let's see how you did with this one. A computer has been delivered to the help desk with a note that says, "Post failed." Which of the following would be the most likely cause of this issue? Is it a bad RAM module? Is it a malware infection? Is it an incorrect video driver? Is it printer not connected or a failed Windows update? 82% of you say it's a bad RAM module. That's a pretty strong affirmative for A. We'll go with A on that one. Single digits for everything else. 8% of you say it's a failed Windows update. 5% of you say it's an incorrect video driver. 3% say the printer is not connected. And 2% say that it is a malware infection. So the real key to this question is understanding POST and understanding what POST stands for. POST is the power on self-test. The POST happens before you start an operating system. So any errors that you get with POST have nothing to do with the OS. Unless, of course, the OS is just not there. I guess POST will tell us. Technically, it's not a POST error when it says the operating system isn't there. But the power on self-test is testing everything outside the scope of the operating system. So it doesn't matter what operating system's on your computer. It could be a Mac, it could be Linux, it could be Windows 10, it could be Windows 8, it could be Windows 7, it could be anything. But POST is going to be exactly the same every time. Every single time you work through this. You'll usually see messages on the screen that talk about the failures, and the failures are going to be associated with things like the CPU, the video, the memory, the core hardware of the system, because that's what we're really testing. We're testing to see, do we have enough of the basic hardware in this system, and is it working well enough to start loading the operating system for all of this? So those are the things to worry about. It may beep at you as well. One of the things you'll notice is that if the video goes out, then it can't show you anything on the screen to tell you that the video is bad. See how that works? So instead it will beep at you. And there will usually be a certain type of beeps or a number of beeps so that you can then go back to the documentation and say, it beeps 7 times. What does that mean? And then it will tell you what those things mean. You don't have to memorize beep codes for the exam, but it's important to know that the beep code is from the POST and it's telling us there's some type of problem so that we can focus in on why that happens to be. That is the POST, the power on self-test, which means that we need to look at the possible answers here and see what answers in this list have nothing to do with the operating system. A malware infection is the malware has infected the operating system. That's not going to be the right answer. An incorrect video driver, the video driver is part of the operating system. That's not going to be the right answer. A printer not connected, printer has nothing to do with the system being able to boot. So not having a printer there is not the problem. A failed Windows update, Windows obviously an operating system. The POST has nothing to do with Windows updating properly or not updating properly. The only answer in this list, not just the most likely cause, but really the only thing that would cause this problem, is a bad RAM module. A bad memory module is outside the scope of the operating system. It's part of the core hardware. It's tested when you start your system up on the power on self-test or the POST, which means that's the only possible thing it could be, is a bad RAM module. 82% of you answered that one right. You got it spot on. It was the memory module. That's why your POST didn't work. As you could see, there's so many different topics on this exam. You can go in a lot of different places with this exam, with hardware, with operating systems, with cloud-based networking, with troubleshooting, all of those different things, having it all there. But one of the things that you'll notice is that on the exam, they just bundle it all together. It's also very difficult to find good Q&A for this exam. That's one thing I found to be universal, is that a lot of the free Q&A on the internet, not very good. Does not prepare you very well for this exam. Even Q&A that you might buy in some cases, not that great. So what I did is made my own Q&A. I created a set of 3 practice exams for the 220-1001 Core 1 exam. These 3 practice exams have exactly the same distribution as the exam objectives list. So the exact same percentages from each domain are represented in these practice exams. These are multiple choice practice exams. There are 5 performance-based questions for each one of these practice exams. So there's 15 performance-based questions in this book. And I give you a detailed list of all of these. In fact, let me show you. I've got it right here. This is a view from my practice exams book. Let's do A8. There's a question that asks, a computer has been configured with an SSD, a high-end video adapter, and the maximum amount of RAM. Which of the following would be the most likely use for this computer? Would it be a thin client, network-attached storage device, a CAD/CAM workstation, or a VDI client? And I have these links that you could, of course, write down or on a separate window, put down what you think the answer is. But I also have links that go directly to the details of the answer. So you can have a look at this as well if you start to look at it. So in fact, let's click on the details. Let's go right to the details. And it takes you to a separate page. This page is page 50 of the book. That says the answer is C, a CAD/CAM workstation. And then I give you a description of what this is. I break it down for you so that you understand why that is the right answer. I, of course, don't always get the right answer, just like all of you. I struggle all the time through these Q&As. And if I get it wrong, I want to know why it's wrong. So for every incorrect answer in the book, I give you a description of why that is the incorrect answer. So you will never again wonder why I chose that incorrect answer. Why is that incorrect? Why is that? I thought I was spot on. I thought I had that one right. Why was I not right? This is an opportunity to learn. Every time you get a question wrong is a great learning opportunity. And so I try to give you the answers here so you can see why these are the wrong answers. And then lastly, I put at the very bottom the more information so you can have a link that goes directly back to the exam video, the video that describes the topics in here. And there's a QR code if you have the physical book, because I do have this in a physical form. You can simply point your camera on your phone at it, and it will take you to the video on your phone. So lots of things to look at on this. If you're struggling and trying to get more information, or you just want to know, am I ready to go in and take this exam? This is a great sanity check. This is a great test to see what you have learned. Have a look at this. This is my Core 1 A+ practice exams. You can find it on my website at professormesser.com/core1pe. There's also a bundle if you get it with my course notes. It's a little bit cheaper. I bundle them together and give you a little break on the price. So you can have a look at that. Same link, professormesser.com/core1pe. And it does help keep the lights on. Thank you for everyone who has purchased this. I get great feedback on this as well. Thank you so much for that. You really do help keep this entire crazy adventure going. So thank you for that. Let's do some more Q&A from our performance-based question. Have this here. So the next question on our list asks, a system administrator is replacing an internal laptop wireless adapter. Which of the following would be the most likely socket type for this adapter? A system administrator is replacing an internal laptop wireless adapter. Which of the following would be the most likely socket type for this adapter? Would it be PCI, PGA, DIMM, LGA, or mini PCIe? So we have to know what socket type would be used for replacing an internal laptop wireless adapter. Is it PCI, PGA, DIMM, LGA, and mini PCIe? Lock in your answer by going to professormesser.com/QA. You can lock that down. Some of you in the chat room were mentioning, yeah, there's a back button. So once you're finished with this question, I hit the command back bracket on my Windows, on my Mac. I'm in a Mac OS to be able to view this here, and it jumps back to the original question, so I can simply go to the next one on my list. So it's an easy way to jump back and forth in the book. You could also, if you're on a Mac, you can add it to the toolbar at the top. You can't see it because my big head's in the way. Let me see if I can pull this down. So on mine, you can see that I put the forward and back arrows right on the toolbar, which is another thing you can do, which makes it a little bit easier to find those things. So that's another thing. And it depends on the operating system you're using. In Windows, it's a different set of keystrokes to be able to do that. It just depends on what reader you happen to be using. So if you're on a Mac OS, I saw someone was trying on the Mac OS. I'm in the preview app there. Is that what I'm using? Yeah, preview apps, what I was using right there. So you'll be able to figure those out. Make sure you have all of that there. Whenever you start working through all of those pieces, see if those, and some of you in the chat room thinking what it could be, because it's not what you thought it would be. You need to really think about that. And it can't be what you thought it was. We'll talk about that in a moment. Let's see what you did, how you did with this one. A system administrator is replacing an internal laptop wireless adapter. Which of the following would be the most likely socket type for this adapter? Now, important thing on these answers, by the way, is it asks which of the following would be the most likely socket type. It may be that the socket type you were expecting is not on this list, and that might be intentional. But you only have a list of these things that you have to choose from. That's an important thing for the exam too. 84% of you said Mini PCI Express. 84%, that's a big number. 10% said PCI, 3% said PGA, 2% said LGA, and 1% said DIM. So this is where we break these down and figure it out. In fact, on a laptop these days, probably over the last 10 years, probably Mini PCI Express is what you're going to find almost always in those devices. Very common, such a common type to have in laptops is the Mini PCI Express. It's small. It fits perfectly into the back of the laptop. It's usually something the user can take a panel off and put in their own adapter cards. Very, very simple to do. Some of you said M.2. M.2 is a relatively new standard, so you're not going to see that. Certainly might see it on newer laptops in the last couple of years, maybe last couple of years, but certainly not before that. But M.2, not commonly used until just recently, and it wasn't one of your choices by design. So you have to look at the choices available in the question to be able to answer these. PCI is those big full-size cards you would fit onto a large motherboard, a desktop system, so it would not be PCI. PGA and LGA are CPU types, socket types, and package types. So that's not what you would use. And then a DIM, in fact, we had a DIM earlier and had those. The DIM, 1% DIM is, none of you really thought was DIM. That's your memory module for that. M.2 is not technically Mini PCI Express, although M.2 can communicate over a Mini PCI Express bus, which is the difference. But the interface itself is not a Mini PCI Express interface. That is not the socket type for that. It's an M.2 socket type. So that's the difference. Those are a little bit different between the Mini PCI Express and the M.2, slightly different for those to be able to have that. In fact, the Mini PCI Express, you'll see it right there. You can see it looks a little bit different. They tried to make it very similar. In fact, the M.2 and pretty much everything follows the same type of format as the Mini PCI, the Mini PCI Express, and some of those others. Very easy to have that there. But M.2 takes it up a notch, much more flexibility, much more functionality in the M.2 to have those. Oh, you can't see it. There you go. Be nice if I clicked the button properly so you could see all those things. There's too many buttons. That's one of the problems to have those. It's just a couple buttons in front of me, all lit up with all of that. I apologize. So we got you covered now so you can see what the Mini PCI Express happen to be. These will fit right into your laptop. There's your interface for it to be able. That's a big one. That's a Mini PCI. To have that there, just kind of connects in, slides into the slot. Now you've got a wireless card or whatever you're plugging into that particular link to have those pieces. We're finding fewer and fewer user customizable features in our laptops these days, aren't we? It's kind of hard to find one of those. But if you do, it probably is going to be an M.2 or the Mini PCI Express for all of those to have all of that there. I would like to be able to work with more inside of my laptop. We're having less opportunity to get inside of our laptops these days, harder and harder to get into all of those and be able to work through them. It's just all kind of filled up at that point. Mini PCI Express was your right answer, though, and 85% of you got that one right, so that really wasn't fooling very many people at all. Not that I'm trying to fool you, but you know what I'm saying. Let's do another question. Next on our list, a technician would like to verify that a laptop power supply is providing the proper amount of voltage. Which of the following should be used for this task? Would it be a multimeter, an inductive probe, a cable tester, a tone generator, or a loopback plug. A technician would like to verify that a laptop power supply is providing the proper amount of voltage. Which of the following should be used for this task? Is it a multimeter, an inductive probe, a cable tester, a tone generator, or a loopback plug? Do you know? Do you know? If you think you know, lock in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Figure out what all those happen to be. This is one that all of those tools that are listed here, multimeter, inductive probe, cable tester, tone generator, loopback plug, you should all have them in your toolboxes. They should all be tools that you are using for your A+, for your Network Plus, for your Security Plus. I carried at least 1, 2 of these everywhere I went because I would always run into things that I needed to troubleshoot. And occasionally I would have at least if I knew I was going to be running into problems, I'd bring all of these with me because you never know when you're going to run into all of those and have it there. See if you know what these happen to be. This might be one that you could work through to have all of that. Go ahead and break down these answers. See if you happen to know what these are. We're going to see if you do know what the answer is for this one. The question asked, a technician would like to verify that a laptop power supply is providing the proper amount of voltage. Which of the following should be used for this task? Is it a multimeter, inductive probe, cable tester, tone generator, or loopback plug? How do we do? Let's click the button. 95% of you say multimeter. Is this one of these situations where we're just all jumping on it and we think it's the right answer, but it really isn't because all the others single digits? Nope, you're right. Multimeter, it's a great tool to have. If you don't have a multimeter, you should get one. They are relatively inexpensive. They come in handy all the time. Whether you're testing voltage that's coming right out of the wall, so you want to be sure that you've got the right voltage and the right configuration. You also want to be able to test things like continuity and voltage, maybe test batteries. They're great for testing batteries. To have this here, well, a multimeter like the one you see here, less than $20 on the Amazon. To have that there. A lot of very useful and decent quality multimeters are out there. There are some bad multimeters out there, don't get me wrong. People in the chat room, absolutely you should know that that's the case. But it's great for doing things like also testing continuity. Is there a fuse that went out? What pin in this cable connects to what pin on the other side of the cable? Fantastic use to have those things there. Make sure that also with some of these things you are working with electricity. And as I mentioned in this video for network tools and other things in my video series, is you should never, never, never connect yourself or a tool to the electrical system unless you know what you're doing. So be very, very careful with these. You can find a multimeter for less than $20. Fantastic tool. I have one that I just took with me everywhere because you would occasionally plug in a firewall and it wouldn't turn on. And the customer, you're like, what happened? What's wrong with the firewall? Is it the firewall power supply? Is it the cable? I pull out the multimeter and plug it into the wall. And people go, well, what are you doing? I'm checking the power in the wall. You plug it in. Nope, there's no power on this outlet. And so we solved a huge problem just by plugging in the multimeter and knew instantly if there was a problem with that particular wall outlet, and sometimes there was. Let's look at these other answers. Although 95% of you said multimeter, let's go through each one of these so you know what they do. An inductive probe works in conjunction with a tone generator. So very commonly you would plug in a tone generator to one end of a cable, and then you would use an inductive probe on the other end, usually a big bunch of wires on the other end, to touch to every single one of those cables to see if you can find the cable that has that tone going through it. So both of those, the inductive probe and the tone generator, you'll often see bundled together to have that there. You also have a cable tester in the list. Cable testers commonly really are just checking continuity, making sure pin 1 is connected to pin 1, pin 2 to pin 2, and etc. The cable tester is one that doesn't do much more than that. You can get cable testers with more functionality. At that point, it becomes more than a cable tester. It's more like something that would be a time domain reflectometer, a TDR, where you're getting a much more detail about the quality of that particular cable connection. And lastly, a loopback plug. Only 1% chose loopback plug. That's when you're checking the physical interface on a device, usually sending data out the loopback plug. It is looping back into itself, into the receive side, and then you're examining the receive side to see if it matches what you sent. And if it doesn't match, then something went very, very wrong on that very short trip out the interface and back in again. So very useful to have that there. That would be what you would do with a loopback plug. In this case, a multimeter is the right answer. Now, if you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, if you would like to receive an email from me that is digitally signed, that gives you a 1-hour webinar category CEU, then you must follow these instructions. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There is a Contact Us link. Click that Contact Us link. It will bring up a form. Put in your name, your email address, and in the subject line, if you could put that it is the November 2020 Core 1 study group. And on a line by itself in the body of the message, put the super secret code word multimeter. The super secret code word for this month, multimeter. Put that in there, and then you can put anything else you'd like in there as well. I read through every single one of these. I can't necessarily respond to all of these because I get hundreds of these in a single month, but I do read through every single one of these that you send. So you're welcome to add anything else to this that you would like. So top or the bottom of the website, click the Contact Us link, fill out the form, and in a single line by itself in the body of the message, put the super secret code word multimeter. Put that right in. You'll be good to have all of that available. That is the answer to this one. Let's see if I can throw you a question that's going to make you think a little bit more. Here's a question from the list that asks, what type of connector would be most commonly associated with a cable modem? Would that be Lightning, RS-232, BNC, F connector, or Molex? What type of connector would be most commonly associated with a cable modem? Is it Lightning, RS-232, BNC, F connector, or Molex? If you think you know the answer, lock in your answer by going to professormesser.com/QA. If you're someone who has stumbled into this live stream, welcome. It is not a private stream. It's a public stream. You're welcome to come in, chat in the chat room, answer questions by going to professormesser.com/QA. There's nothing to register for. There's nothing behind a paywall. There's nothing special you have to do. Just put it all in there, put your answer in, and you'll do just fine. Finding all of those, figure out the details of that. Whenever I start breaking down these, it becomes useful to also know what these happen to be. So if you go through each one of those, all 5 of those are real connectors. So make sure you're at least familiar with them. If one doesn't look familiar, make a note of it and figure out what that connector is, because they are all in exam objectives. Maybe this question didn't ask about that connector, and maybe it's not the right answer for this question, but you still need to know it. So that's the same across pretty much every question I ever ask. I very rarely put in here something that isn't real, but if I do, I always tell you that's something I made up. But I try not to do that because I want you to see real things in the answers. I want you to see them and recognize that they are actually real things, so you can figure out the details of this. Hopefully that will help you as well as you break through and figure out the details. Let's see how you did with this one. What type of connector would be most commonly associated with a cable modem? How did we do? 53% of us say it's an F connector. 24%, almost a quarter of us, say BNC is what that is. 16%, still double digits, say RS-232 is what we would use for a cable modem. Single digits, 5% say Molex, 2% say Lightning to have this. Cable modems, it'd be useful to know what type of connection would go on the back of a cable modem. So a cable modem uses the same cable that your cable television uses, which is that coax connection with the little screw-in piece at the end of it. That little screw-in piece at the end of it is called an F connector. So that's the one that you would see if you were looking at the back of your cable television or the back of your cable modem. to be able to see this and have that there. This is one where it could be either a coax type called RG6 or RG59, either one of those, very common to use. They're used in different cases, but it could be either one for a cable modem connection, depending on where it's coming from. This is one that becomes very useful if you're trying to figure out the details of this piece, but this is also one of those that I think as you step through and understand what connectors on the back, it's useful to know what DSL uses as a connector. What does a cable modem use as a connector, or DOCSIS modem uses a connector? What does a metropolitan Ethernet connection use? What type of connector is it? Those are important things, especially as you look through the back of these to be able to see it. So F connectors, another one of those pieces on the exam objectives you absolutely need to know. Make sure you're familiar with it. If we step through these others, 53% of you, we at least got a majority in the F connector. 23% said B and C. The type of connector you commonly see on a DS3 WAN connection. You see it on video connections. I see it on my SDI connections. In fact, we looked at a BNC connector earlier that was on a converter that I use for video. BNC commonly used for that. I see that also. Yep, I see it on security cameras. That's an analog security camera configuration. Commonly uses coax with BNC connectors on it. That is something you would see, but not commonly associated with cable modems. BNC is not what you would see on a cable modem. RS-232 is also not what you would see on cable modems. That is usually a 9 or 25 pin serial connection. So you commonly would see RS-232. It's not really cable type, it's more of a signal type, but we often associate it with that 9-pin or 25-pin connector and almost commonly use it in that way as well. RS-232 absolutely used for console connections into switches, routers, firewalls, although these days we commonly see USB used for something like that, or even RJ11 or RJ45 for RS-232, but not on a cable modem. So we can throw that one out. Not on a cable modem. 5% said Molex. Molex is that 4-pin power connection commonly associated with old hard drives and old devices, although you sometimes still see them used for fans inside of a desktop computer. And then Lightning is an Apple proprietary connector commonly used for phones and tablets. There's a Lightning connector, very small, tiny thing, not used for cable modems. The only answer here that would be appropriate for this one is indeed the F connector. That's the one. I have no idea what the F stands for. Is it just they were numbering them? They were having letters, A, B, C, D. I have no idea. Does the F stand for something? I have no idea. I should probably look into some of these and figure that out. It's kind of hard to Google F connector and figure that one out, though. So I have to figure that out. Do we have time for another one? We have time for one more question. Let's fit another one into our list. The next one on our list asked, we're back to cloud computing. Here we are. A cloud computing infrastructure places all of the resources in one place to allocate cloud services. Which of the following would best describe this characteristic? Would that be measured service, rapid elasticity, resource pooling, external cloud, or metered services? Cloud computing infrastructure places all of the resources in one place to allocate cloud services. Which of the following would best describe this characteristic? Is it a measured service, rapid elasticity, resource pooling, external cloud, or metered services? You think you know the answer? Lock it in. ProfessorMesser.com/QA. Figure out all of the details. As always, lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. I don't think it's a fair rule because it's not that type of connector is not a fair rule connector, is it? I think that would describe the type of connector. Maybe it is. In a very odd term of that. I've always seen that referred to fair rule connector used with the hardened type of connection commonly seen in things like fiber connections these days, and figuring out the details. Make that figure it out what these happen to be. Lock in your answer. Cloud computing infrastructure, putting all the resources in one place. What would it be? See if you can figure out the details of this. Lock in your answer. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. you'll be able to get the answer listed, at least locked in. We'll see if we figure out the details of that. Is it frequency? We don't know. It's a mystery. This is one of those where you're sitting around the dinner table and a question will come up like, where did that come from? Why do we call it coleslaw? You know, that kind of thing. And that guy, let's Google that. Why do we call it coleslaw? It's kind of that connection. Why do we call it an F connector for those things? When did we see that happen before? What happens if this thing happens in history? Has that happened before in history? Let's find out. Click, click, click. Gotta love the Google for something like that. You ask Siri, she'll tell you. Or more often than not tell you, as it turns out. She'll tell you that you need to Google it. Thanks, Siri. That's all I've really found useful, is that she tells me I need to Google things. I had no idea that I had to Google things. Let's see if I know the answer to this one. Maybe you didn't Google this one. To figure it out, resource pooling, 75% of you say resource pooling is what it happens to be. 10% of you say external cloud is what that is. 7% said rapid elasticity. 4% said measured service, and 4% said metered service, which are two different things. They sound similar, but two different things. It is kusla, and that is what we found when we Googled coleslaw. That means cabbage salad. Who knew? Well, we did know once we Googled it. It's right. That one was an easy one. F connector, though, we just don't know. Someone will figure this out before we're done, though. Resource pooling. This is a beautiful part of the cloud, is you just buy an enormous sized machine with lots of memory and lots of storage and plenty of CPU, and then you just start cutting it up into little pieces whenever you need it. And when you're done with it, you just release those little pieces back into the pool, and someone else can use the pooled connectivity to have all of those. Whenever you start breaking those out and figuring out all of that, this really does help to know what the details are for this one, the resource pooling, to have that. 76% of you were spot on with that, but all of these are actual cloud-based services. So 10%, the external cloud, means that the cloud is available from the outside. And it's also available as an external service that you are getting from another person. Kind of two meanings with that particular one, and to have all of that there. Well, got other options here in being able to do this. A rapid elasticity means that you are able to quickly create more services and quickly remove those services, all without the end users knowing anything happened. It's very elastic, like a rubber band. You can make it, end of the month, things get busy. You can add on more resources to cover the load. And then the beginning of the month, when things get quiet again, you can pare it back down again, so you're not paying so much for having all of that. Rapid elasticity is not the same thing as on demand. Rapid elasticity describes how you are able to increase and decrease the available resources, but it does not talk about on demand. Means that you can go and push a button and make that happen on demand, but it doesn't necessarily describe the actual part of it getting larger. On demand is really the action that causes it to be elastic, if you want to break those out that way. And then, of course, you have measured service and a metered service. Metered services are when you're paying as you use it. You know, if you have something like Google Drive or Google Mail and you're paying for extra space, it's a flat fee, which is a non-metered service. You're just buying it as a flat fee. But maybe you pay a little bit as you go. For example, if you're on ProfessorMesser.com right now, I pay for bandwidth. So if more people use that bandwidth, it is metered and it is charged back to me on a metered basis. It's very similar to a measured service. A measured service can be metered or non-metered, because metered and non-metered is really talking about billing. Measured talks about how much of it is being used. And so that you're at least able to track it in a very detailed, in some cases, very granular way, which is a huge benefit for cloud-based services. So measured service. Should I use your website less to save me money? No. Use my website as much as you want. I will pay the money for you using my website. That does not save me money. Do not log off of my website. Keep using it. I want to give you reasons to come to my website to use it. So you should absolutely stay on the site. I do not. This is a problem I would love to have. I would love to have so many people coming to my site that I just can't afford to keep. No, that's not an issue. The benefit of cloud computing to be fair, to be quite honest and not so funny about that particular topic, it's relatively inexpensive to keep a site running these days. You, of course, have to have some type of income coming in, videos and then the course notes and practice exams. Those things help, of course, keep all of this going, thankfully. But it does cost. There's a cost associated with it, and that's very common for cloud-based services to have that there. So no, do not worry about coming to my website. Keep coming to my website and have all of those there. To have that. We got a fight going on in the chat room about what F connector means. I knew this was going to happen. That is not my pool. That'd be nice though, wouldn't it? Pretty much every image you see in my courses, everything in here is all stock photos. I'm not showing you. You're not going to see anything about my life in my videos. So that's a good example of one that you're just not going to run into. To finish this up, resource pooling is the right answer. For those of you that answered C, resource pooling, you got it absolutely correct. Well done with that one. All of the questions in here came directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. Some folks were asking about that earlier. All of them came from the exam objectives. If you don't have these objectives, you will be in trouble. This is a huge advantage to you if you're studying for this exam or you're planning to take the test. Make sure you have these objectives. They have everything listed that you need to know. That is pretty nice to have that. If you ever wonder, am I ready to take this exam? It lists everything you need to know. It will tell you if you're ready to take the exam, and they're free. ProfessorMesser.com/objectives. Download them free. ProfessorMesser.com/objectives. There's a link, take you right to the CompTIA website, and you can download the exam objectives. Make sure you get your hands on those. Don't forget about these study groups. I do another study group. This was our Core 1 today. We do a Core 2 study group on Thursday. So I get a day off. I'm really busy that day, but Thursday, I rest my voice and then come back on Thursday. And we'll do the Core 2 study group on Thursday. And then in December, because it is kind of the holiday season, I've kind of crammed in the study groups next month. So on the 8th and the 10th are the A+ study groups. Network Plus on the 15th, Security Plus on the 17th. I got a lot of writing to do to have all of that there. So come back depends on what time will it be. Well, I'm glad you asked. All you have to do is go to ProfessorMesser.com/calendar, and it will list the exact time in my time zone and give you a calendar conversion for your time zone. So you will know exactly what time it is going to be at ProfessorMesser.com/calendar. Can you believe we went through an hour of Q&A? Boom, it's already over. What happened? That's okay. Stick around. We got more questions. You now get to ask me questions. So I'm going to turn this boat around so that you can call in. You can ask questions in the chat room. I've got questions already queued up you've already sent me. We'll talk about those in just a moment too. Don't forget about my course notes and my practice exams and my success bundle. You can find that on my website at ProfessorMesser.com/1001success. And of course, don't forget about the links that you should know. If you like this study group, if you thought this was something, you got at least one of those questions, you learned something, hit that like button. It really does go a long way to keep this whole thing going. I have people now at YouTube that I can converse with. I've got my own account manager because you were nice enough to click that like button. It's such a simple thing and doesn't cost you anything, and it really does help. If you're ever on somebody's YouTube channel and they say, please like us, they're telling you because it really does go a long way. So thank you for doing that. If you like this, also consider subscribing. I've got tons of new videos coming out. You may have even seen my most recent one, which was why your resume might have been rejected. 5 reasons why your resume might have been rejected. That's a brand new video that I've got out. So it's been out like 2 weeks now. So it's one of my latest. You can find that at ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube. Great place to go. Stick around. We've got plenty more Q&A, plenty more things to come. Thank you for being here for the main part of the show. We'll see you on the other side. Thanks for joining us on the A+ study group. Well, let's see if I can click a few things on this side. There we go. It's now the after show. Who knows what's going to happen now for all of this? We will figure out where we go from here. So if you will bear with me one moment, I have to call in to my own show. Nobody's here but me. So I have to figure out as I type all these things in, if you will bear with me one moment. I call into my own show. The show is actually hosted in the cloud. So I'm going to call into my show before you call into my show, maybe at the same time, and get this thing going. So it takes about a minute or two while I start up the cloud-based service. There it goes on my side. I call in using my Skype. And to my own call in, makes a bunch of noises there. Dun, dun,
The number you're
dun,
calling
dun.
from has been associated with high volume calling use.
Yes, it has.
To continue, press 6, 5.
Wow. Did not have that one before. Let's see what it does.
The number you are calling from has been
Come
associated
on.
with high volume calling use. To continue, press 4, 6.
All right. We'll just keep typing things in until the nice lady decides to let us continue with the phone number. Nope, not going to happen. Just hung up on me. Well, this might be a very short after show.
Thank you for calling.
And now works fine. Now it just lets me right in. This happened last time, didn't it? I have to type in a thing on my side. So let me type this in and then hit a pound sign.
Enter your 6-digit PIN.
Oh, that's easy for you to say. At least we got this far, right? And the nice lady says,
Welcome, Professor Messer.
well, thank you, nice lady. Now we can do something. See how easy that was? I don't know either, but there it is. Now at least we got the phone lines open. We will, of course, take your phone line. This is where you call in using a telephone and your voice. I know it's kind of an odd thing if you want to communicate that way, but you absolutely can. In the continental U.S., you would call a toll-free number, 855-785-RJ45. West of the Rockies, 855-785-7545. That will get you there. If you're outside of the continental U.S., you can also call me for free. I will pay for it. Use Skype. Inside of Skype, you don't have to pay any Skype minutes. Just put a +1 at the beginning, just like it shows on the screen. +1 855-785-7545. And you can call in there. I also take questions from the chat room, so you're more than welcome to get those questions going there as well. I have some other things while we are doing that. For those of you that have kind of followed along with the Success Bundle on my website, one of the benefits that you get with the Success Bundle is a priority Q&A. You can ask questions, and I'm guaranteed to answer those questions right here at the beginning of the after show. Let's get to these. The first question comes from Yvonne, which she asks, do I need to learn any programming language to work as a network technician? This comes up all the time. This is a very popular question. And I think it is very useful to have these logic skills, and in some ways, I guess, scripting skills. I don't want to call these programming skills because I think programming is about creating applications. If you want to build a mobile app, if you want to build an app for a website, if you want to build a standalone executable for Windows or for Mac OS or for Linux, that's programming, or at least in my parlance, in the way I describe it as we are talking right here, that's what I consider programming to be. But if you want to be able to automate, and automation is a huge part of IT, if you want to be able to make things happen automatically, then you need to have all kinds of scripting skills. You need to understand how to script at a batch file in Windows, or PowerShell on Windows would be even more powerful. Be able to run shell scripts in Linux, another important piece of this. Be able to write your own more advanced scripts and automation. And the one that we use almost exclusively, not exclusively, but a huge amount of people are using to be able to enable this functionality of automation is Python. It's just a very, very popular and very flexible application scripting language, or scripting language. Don't want to call it an application language, but a very nice scripting language. And Python for networking especially. And I think the popularity of Python really caught on when we created this cloud. We needed ways to automate the cloud. We needed ways to automatically increase the number of resources available. We talked earlier about having that flexibility, the elasticity of the cloud. And if the cloud starts getting busy, it can start popping up new servers and supporting users without the users even seeing that there was a slowdown. It just keeps everything running. Well, something has to start that process. How do you know when it's time to build out more servers? How do you know when it's time to tear down the servers? You need some automation to be able to do that. Doing that manually, that's just a waste of your time. That's something that can always be done automatically. So having a language to do that like Python, it was custom made to do things like this, to be able to look for problems, to be able to solve those problems, and then you don't even have to be there. You didn't even have to know it happened until after the fact. That's one of the benefits of Python. So all those scripting languages you hear about in the A+, which deal with batch files, shell scripts, PowerShell, maybe not JavaScript as much, but certainly Python. If you did Python and PowerShell, and those were the only two you knew, you would be solid. You'd be really, in really good shape. You throw shell scripting on top of that for Linux, and you're unstoppable. You know, those are the things you can focus on. I think that's where we talk about not programming language, but scripting language is definitely what you need to know to be somewhat capable when it comes to doing anything on A+, network plus security plus anything in IT. We've done automation forever in IT. It's not going to end. It's only going to be more automated as we go. Make sure you're familiar with those. Next question on the list comes from David, which asks, what other alternatives are there to replace Adobe Flash Player that will no longer be supported by Adobe after December the 31st of 2020? This is something that you've probably seen. A lot of websites aren't even using Flash Player anymore, but there are certain applications that must have Flash Player to work. So we're really relying on the application developers to be able to update their applications so they're not using Flash Player anymore. It's not really a case where you get to decide this. Your decision is, do you use the applications that rely on Adobe Flash Player after December 31st? Some would argue that you should have thrown those apps out a long time ago anyway, because a Flash Player seemed to be, at one point, it was the vulnerability of the moment was a Flash Player vulnerability. As we have stopped using so much of it, you will notice that we're not really in situations where we're having to worry about Flash Player. If you go to YouTube, YouTube doesn't use Flash Player anymore. It uses a combination of HTML5 and some fancy schmancy JavaScript to make all of this work. And if you look at how we used the Flash Player from Adobe, a huge percentage of it was just streaming videos. Flash has so much more functionality. It has this fantastic automation inside of it. There's animation functionality. There is scripting that you could do. There's all kinds of graphical features that were available that we almost never saw. We were just using it to stream video. Well, if that's the case, we could just throw it out and use something else to stream that video. And that's pretty much what we've done at this point. If you have an app that requires Flash Player, you have to make a decision. Am I going to continue using that app? Is the manufacturer of that app going to make a new version of the app that does not use Flash? Are they not? Then you got to make a decision to have all of that there. Yeah, Microsoft made a run at Flash back in the day with Silverlight. They absolutely did. There was one point where I was trying to figure out, do I go with a DRM solution, and do I do a DRM with Flash? Do I do a DRM with Silverlight? Ultimately, I decided just not to do DRM, which turned out to be the right answer, because that was just be a mess if I went down that road. So I would recommend, David, if you're trying to figure out what you can do, being able to work with Adobe Flash, you should have thrown it out already, and then ask the manufacturer who's using that particular Flash, are we gonna get rid of that? There may be a point where you don't have a choice, so you're going to have to make some decisions. Do you run that app in a VM? Is that VM disconnected from the internet? There's things you can do to still run Flash in a relatively safe environment. And some of you may be in that situation where you have to do that. You just don't have a choice to be able to make that happen. At the very least, you should disable Flash in your browser. And then if you have to use Flash, have a completely separate configuration for something that needs to have Flash. Maybe that'll help you, David. The third and last question on our list from JN. I already know lots about the concepts of CompTIA A+. I will say JN, for those of you wondering, kind of sounds funny. This was English, not JN's first language, and that's perfectly fine. I already know lots of the concepts of CompTIA A+. My goal is to take both exams in 1 month around the first week of December. Is that realistic or wise? This is a common question, by the way, about taking the exam, because with A+, you have to pass both the 1001 and the 1002 exam. And there are some study materials out there that, for some reason, recommend that you take both of them at the same time. An absolutely ridiculous statement. I have no idea why someone would ever recommend that unless they are interested in seeing you fail miserably. That is a horrible recommendation for people that are just learning this technology. Now, if you've already been in the industry 10 years, you already know this content, you're trying to get this certification as a check mark, maybe a company wants you to have it, and you already know it, you could probably take both of them the same day and you're fine. But the two exams cover very different topics. There's not a lot of overlap between those two exams. I highly recommend you study for one at a time. Doesn't matter which one you do first. You study for one, take that exam, pass that exam, then shift your gears over to the second one. Study for as long as it takes for you to study everything from the exam objectives for the second exam, then take that exam and pass it. That is your highest potential pass category. That's the best possibility for passing is that one. So make sure that you are giving plenty of time between these exams to study for them. There's no time frame. There's no time you would have to have between them to as a minimum. For example, you pass your first exam, you have to pass the second exam before the exam series is retired. So what is that, 2 years from now? So if you passed one today, you would have 2 years before you'd have to pass the second one or so. So that's a good example for anyone who's working on this, is give yourself plenty of time. Do not take both of these exams at the same time. Do not study for both of these exams at the same time. You're killing yourself for no good reason, because there's no overlap between these two. Very little overlap. So that's the thing you should absolutely think about. Take it in the time that makes sense for you. Now, if you're a brainiac and you already know this stuff and you could take them in 2 weeks, sure, absolutely go with that. Not many of us out there are like that. It takes me 3 to 6 months to study for a certification exam. So that should be what you do as well. Think about how much time it's going to take you to be able to go through with this. That might help you with some of the things you're doing. And hopefully that will answer the question for you, JN, to have all of that there. Well, I thank you for those questions. If you'd like to have priority, you can always get my success bundle. I'll answer your questions with the priority. There's a link right in your member download section. You can send me those questions. Let's go back to the phones. Let's go to the phones. We've got some people that are holding. Thank you for calling in. We will start with the 914 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, my name is David, and I'm calling from Nebraska, Omaha, please.
Thanks, David. Appreciate you calling. What can we do for you?
I just want to start off saying this. I just want to say thank you so much. You've been such a huge help, like with me trying to excel at this program. So I'm actually scheduled to take my exam tomorrow, and I'm pretty confident I know everything. I've studied intensively. I've used your videos. I've watched all this group study. It's just I'm a little bit nervous because it's quite a bit of money to pay for the exam. So
Right.
I'm just like, can you give me any last-minute tip that would help me with me being nervous regarding taking this exam? Because I know I know everything. It's just I'm quite nervous regarding taking this exam.
I think one day before is probably not the most optimal of giving recommendations, usually a week before, but this still applies. And I think one of the best things you can do prior to going into your exam is you figure out the spots where you just don't have everything down 100%. And one of the best ways to do that is in the exam objectives. Go grab the objectives, professormesser.com/objectives. There's a link that takes you over to the CompTIA website. Go to that list and use it as a checklist. Start circling the things that maybe you just don't know as well as the others. Go through the entire list. It's going to take you quite a bit of time to go through that entire list, but do it. Go through everything. And if you know things pretty well, you can cross those out. But if you come across some topics that you're just not 100% on, maybe those are ones you should circle. And if you've got 24 hours or a week before your exam, those are the topics you should focus on, because generally speaking, that's how it always works for me. They always ask me the thing I don't know. So find those things you don't know, and you'll be able to circle those out. And then at least you've got a day to spend just going through those individual topics. And that might help you on the refresh as well. Maybe they're not as difficult to know as you think. You can then cross those off the list and go to the next thing that you've circled. I think it makes a great checklist, and it's a great way to kind of do a sanity check and make sure that you're ready to take that exam.
Thank you so much. I've done that. I've actually went through all the objectives from your website and everything, and I'm pretty sure I got it all covered up. It's just you just feel that little nerve-wrack, like what happens if I don't pass? I have that constant reminder that.
That's kind of how we all have to deal with these exams when we're sitting down for them. I do horrible when I sit down on the exam. The first 10 minutes of my test are just awful because I'm very nervous for the same reason. I have to get through this exam. I put a lot of pressure on myself to pass. I spent money on this certification. I don't want to have to spend this money again. You don't want to be in that situation. It takes me about 10 minutes to settle down, and then finally I can get on with taking the exam at that point. If you've gone through all the objectives, the last thing I recommend is more Q&A. Get as much Q&A as possible. Test yourself. Get questions wrong. Find out why you got those questions wrong, and that's going to help you on your exam.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate everything you do. I'll also be using your materials, your exam, and your practice text, and the notebooks to study for the Core 2, and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very, very much.
I appreciate it too, David. Best of luck.
Thanks.
Always good to know. You've got that time frame leading up to an exam where you're just trying to fit it in there. Always keep in mind, though, I think 48 hours prior to the exam, you can change the date. So if you're 2 days out and you're thinking, I am just not comfortable enough with what I need to know, push it out a week. You can keep pushing it a week as much as you want. You can reschedule as many times as you would like. So as long as you do it up to more than 48 hours beforehand, more than 2 days beforehand, that'll help you as well. Let's go back to the phone lines. 470. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. Hello, caller.
Hey, how you doing?
So good. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Okay. I'm actually I'm sorry I got this on both speakers. My fault. I'm actually scheduling my A+ Core 1 sometime next week, and I want to get into cybersecurity analyst, and I want to know, after my Security Plus and Network Plus, would I be eligible? Would I still have to get an entry-level network engineer job or something like that?
It really depends on your location, and it depends on what people are hiring for. And I say location because the larger the area that you are in, the more opportunities there will be for entry-level security positions. And most specifically, it's something like a SOC, which is a security operations center. If you're in a large metropolitan area, there are usually large companies there that have these large security operations centers, and they need people on the entry level to be able to get in there and manage all of those systems, keep everything up and running, monitor what's going on, contact people when problems occur. Those are not security jobs you will find everywhere. In fact, it's very hard to find an entry-level IT security job. most of the time we're getting people in security that already have some familiarity with the technologies. They've been working with operating systems. They've been network professionals. They've administered networks, and they're using all of that knowledge and bringing it into security. Most of the people that work in IT security are experts in networking. So you don't just start in IT security, because you also have to have all of that knowledge going in. But the place where you can almost sneak in kind of at the bottom is that security operations center job. Those are where the large companies want to hire someone who does not currently have a lot of knowledge, but they know that you've got A+ certification, Network+ certification, maybe Security+ certification. You've got those, so you at least have some basics of the nomenclature of the technologies. And when they put you in that role, you'll be able to recognize some of those terms. Oh, here's IPS. Oh, here's cloud computing. Here's all of those things that you run into with security type roles. If you are in one of those large parts of the world, your call said it was from Atlanta. That's a fantastic place because they're a big security operations center in the Atlanta area. Huge companies in Atlanta in finance, in manufacturing, in transportation, just anything you could think of in Atlanta. Some big companies that are there. All of them have security operations centers in Alpharetta, in downtown Atlanta. They're all over. Used to be an area where I spent a lot of time doing IT security work, and plenty of jobs available in that security operations center. Look at your LinkedIn, look at your Indeed and your Dice.coms. Look for those SOC or security operations center jobs. That might be able to get you in with some of those entry-level certs. Otherwise, you're kind of working yourself up into those roles. You're starting with an IT help desk. You're starting with workstation management. You're starting with the network management side, and you're kind of working yourself up the scale that way. Both of those are completely viable ways to get into security, and probably those are two of the most common ways to get into security as well.
Thank you. I really needed to hear that. You kind of broke it down kind of how I needed to hear it, because in Atlanta, it isn't unheard of. A lot of entry people just jumping straight to cybersecurity. That's why I asked that. But I really appreciate it.
You're in a great location. Best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Kind of miss going to Atlanta. I went to Atlanta every week in the last job. I'm based in Florida, and I would go. I covered initially, well, I've had a crazy places as a territory. I've had worldwide was my territory at one point. Then the East Coast of the United States was a territory, and it kind of shrunk down from there down to the Southeast U.S. So I got to go to Atlanta a lot. So you've got these big companies in Atlanta. You've got train transportation is in Atlanta, based there. You've got E-Trade. You've got a Home Depot. You've got AT&T Wireless. You've got these huge companies, and they've got all of their resources right there in Atlanta. What a great place to pull these types of jobs from. Fantastic. Let's go back to the phones. Thank you for holding for so long. The 215 area code. Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from? Caller. Did you?
Hi.
Hey. Go ahead, caller. You were there for a second.
And can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. What's your question?
Yes, I'm not sure if I'm the 215 caller, but if you get to hear me, okay, good.
You are the 215 caller. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Ken. I just happen to have a question. I'm stuck on one thing when it comes to domain joining, and that is to say on Windows Server 2019, having a Kali Linux on a virtual machine, join the domain on that server 2019. So what happens is I join, I can see my machine, but I cannot use a domain user to log in into the Kali Linux machine on that virtual machine. Does that make sense? So
it does make sense.
The last step here.
One of the things that I will bet it's related to, and of course there's all these combinations of things when you start getting into Active Directory and working through those things. And then not only that, you're combining what is primarily a Windows environment with Active Directory and trying to access that from an operating system that is not Windows. Not that that's impossible to do, but it adds another level of complexity to the entire thing. You'll almost always run into problems with DNS, primarily because when you're on a Windows environment, it's also kind of a self-contained Windows thing. The way that these Windows devices find the Active Directory server is that they query DNS to get that information. It's in the DNS servers that are in that Windows environment. And very often, the DNS servers and the DHCP servers and the Active Directory servers are the same devices. So they all know about each other. But when you've got a third device that is coming in that may have a DNS configuration that is not the DNS that is built into the Windows environment, then your device is going to query for that Active Directory and not get a response because whatever DNS server it's pointing to knows nothing of that Active Directory. So if you're ever in an environment, even setting up Windows in an Active Directory environment, always check the DNS. That's the first thing I would always recommend you do if you're struggling and having a problem connecting to or talking from a DNS perspective. Make sure you do that. The other thing I would recommend doing is having a look at the configuration of Linux. That Linux sounds like it's one that is very open, but very often you will find that some Linux have firewall D or some other type of packet filtering built in that limits it communicating out to those. I suspect your case, probably a DNS situation. Have you had a chance to look at the DNS settings on that?
Yes. It's funny. I can still log in with Windows 7 and Windows 10. With the other two machines that I have that join the domain. So that works fine. The only problem is the Kali Linux.
There's obviously other things you have to layer on to Kali to be able to do that. And it also depends on how you're connecting to it. Are you joining the domain? Probably not from that, but you're trying to connect to the domain using SMB or some other type of file system that is the same on both sides. And you, of course, have to use the right nomenclature, the right terms to be able to specify your login name and password, usually with the domain information. But if you have the right terms in there, you're typing in the username properly, and obviously the password's correct, you usually are able to find the right combination of those two things. It can be done because I've done it as well.
Yeah. Well, I asked that question because I've exhausted my options. Even one of the instructors that we're doing this project with, I've asked, but I haven't gotten a response from him yet. So that's why I asked while I'm on here. Hopefully, give me a new perspective.
That's about the total I can probably provide. I connect up a Windows and Linux device for my SAN. It does take a combination of different things. You have to make sure the SMB is set on one side, running Samba or some other type of service on your Linux side, making sure they talk to each other, and then finally gets working.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, I appreciate the time.
Well, I'm sorry I couldn't get you any further, but hopefully you'll figure that one out. And if you do, let us know, Ken.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you.
That's one of those. It's a constant challenge when you start connecting these together. I've got Linux, Windows, and Mac OS all running in one environment to one SAN and trying to make them all work together because I want to pull files and move data as quickly as possible between all of those. And as quickly as possible doesn't necessarily mean AFS or SMB or even FTP or some other similar type of, SFTP. It really is a combination of different things sometimes. And then you add on top of that jumbo frames, add on top of that an additional VLAN. Now you're adding more complexity to the problem. It's another situation wherever you run into those. Let's go back to the phones to the 202 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Oh, how you doing? This is Joe. I'm calling from Washington, D.C.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Yes, I have two questions. So the first one's about Tor. So I learned that Tor is a browser that some people use because they're concerned about security and it's supposed to be very secure. A browser that's typically used by people who are very experienced in the field. So my question is, do you think it can be somewhat dangerous to use Tor in that there may be threat actors that may be looking for people who use Tor? So like maybe you use Tor as a way to protect yourself, but maybe is it possible that there are threat actors that will see you as more of a big fish because you're using more advanced security measures?
I don't know about the big fish part, but there is no single security mechanism that is a panacea. There's not one thing you can do to prevent bad guys from finding you and taking advantage of you. For those of you that have never used Tor, the Onion Router, that's what Tor is a method of encrypting and sending information through usually many different midpoints. And then at the end of all of these midpoints on the other side of the Onion Router, you can pop out into what is the normal internet on the other side. Within that Onion Router network, there can also be a dark net. There can be a net that's not even seen from the internet side of things. That is probably not what users are running into. They're usually using Tor as effectively a free VPN and then popping out of the VPN on the other side because other people have been nice enough to build their own Onion routers, and you're simply hopping through everybody else to continue that encryption. Within the Onion Router network, your packets are relatively secure. Your encrypted data is going from point A to point B. But there have been cases where people have been able to manipulate data going through an Onion router, especially if you're popping out of the router on the other side and going back into the normal internet side of things. It's a perfect place to do a man in the middle. So people are able to manipulate that way. It does add complexity. It does add a security concern when you are trying to add security into what is effectively an insecure environment. On top of that, there have been cases where people who are in law enforcement are using some of those exit nodes as a way to track people using Tor, and effectively negates the whole point of using Tor to begin with. So although Tor does add a little bit of security, it's better than nothing. I would not say it points you out as a bigger opportunity, but there are significant security concerns when using it. You almost would want to use your own private VPN software regardless of whether you were using the Onion router or not, if you really, really, really wanted to have that level of security through the network. No single thing is going to be the right solution. It's going to be a layering of things, and it will depend on the situation you find yourself in as to what that layering looks like. But I like the idea of using Tor, at least in a way to help with the anonymization and the protection of data, but it does not completely anonymize, and it does not completely protect data, and people using it should be aware of that as well, Joe.
Okay, and one more question. A question about Internet of Things devices. So I was surprised. One opinion I heard about Internet of Things devices is that they tend to be very easy to compromise. And one piece of advice I heard was that some people think that Internet of Things devices are so easy to compromise that you're actually better off putting them outside of the firewall than inside of the firewall. Is this true? Or
I don't know about outside of the firewall as being something that makes a lot of sense, because there's a good reason to have things like that inside of your firewall. You don't want to leave them completely open to the world. But I do like the idea of having IoT devices on their own network. I'll tell you how I did my network to give you an idea of how I have IoT devices. I have a lot of IoT devices. We all seem to these days. I have one for my garage door. I have Nest devices for air conditioning. I've got IoT devices for doors and other things that are in my house. I don't want to go into many details of what's there. And you are correct that IoT devices are usually designed by hardware people, and in some cases software people, but there are always going to be opportunities to find vulnerabilities. And IoT devices are very simple devices, and in some ways are designed by people who are not security professionals. So I would argue that perhaps you're right there. These may be devices that are less secure than other devices that we commonly would see in our homes. What I've done is I've got a router, a wireless router, an internet router that I use on my network that has my internal network, but it also has a mechanism for a guest network. And the router itself allows me to put a separate wireless network as the guest network and keep my other wireless network as my home network. Those are two separate wireless SSIDs running from the same radio that's inside of that router. What I can also configure there, and by default it's this way, is that you can tell it if you're on the guest network, you can't talk to my home network. You can only talk to the internet. That's a perfect place for IoT devices. I put all of my doorbell, my air conditioning system, my garage door, they're on the guest network. And I don't even call it the guest network. It's literally called IoT as the SSID in my network. All of those go on my IoT network. If somebody does happen to find a vulnerability in my garage door opener and they gain access, they get root access, or they get some type of interactive access to that device, and they're able to jump from that to anywhere else on my network, the only other place they could possibly go is to another IoT device. They can't go into my home network. They can't go into my work network. They can't get onto my SAN. They can't see any of the laptops and desktops on my home network because they are virtually separated, separated out on the separate wireless networks that I have inside of that router. It effectively firewalls off all of my IoT from everything else. And if you have IoT devices, I highly recommend that you get a wireless router with that type of functionality and stick all of your IoT devices on that. I think it was just last week where they found yet another vulnerability on a Nest version 2 hardware that, according to the vulnerability, it looked like at the time that it was in the hardware of the device itself and could not be fixed with a firmware upgrade. So that got me thinking, wow, I better make sure that I've stuck everything out on the IoT network. I would hate for somebody to get access to a Nest and from there gain access to my private financial documents because I didn't put it on the right wireless network. So I made sure all of those were put there. I would not put them on the DMZ, and I would not put them on the internet-facing side because that makes them even more accessible on the internet. They still need to be protected. They still need to be on a private network that's on the inside. You just need to make sure that it's a network that is segmented from your own personal network and all your other devices.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate the call, Joe. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I think I might have gone a little overboard in Joe's question, but I think it's important, and it's something we almost haven't thought about. Joe was absolutely right. These devices are not very secure. I think basically all these devices not very secure. So make sure that you've set these up with their own private network. Segment them out. Make sure nobody is really getting access to your network. That would be horrible if somebody gained access to a Nest and from there was able to take your financial details. That just is just horrible. I wish I could show it to you, and I really should make a network diagram of this just so you had a way to see it. But I use a Synology. Well, I'll tell you. I'll type it in right now. What's the IP address of that device? Do I have a routing table to it? I do. That device is a Synology router. Which model is it? Is it the 2600 AC? I think that's it off the top of my head. Control panel and device. It is a RT 2600 AC is the wireless router I use to be able to do that. Very, very capable router. Not an inexpensive router. I love it. It's such a nice router. It does everything I need it to do and then some. Incredibly flexible, really useful. router, if you're looking for a high-end router, gigabit connectivity and high-end AC wireless connectivity and just tons of flexibility in the operating system, well supported, it's a nice router. And that's what I use to be able to do that. Back to the phones. Thanks for holding for so long, caller in the 347 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from New York.
New York. Go ahead. What's your question?
When I look things up, I see a lot of. Oh, hello.
Hi.
Hello?
Hi. What's your question?
Oh, my question is I am changing fields and I'm learning about this field, and I wanted to understand about iOS and how to download it because I'm using the GNS3 and I'm having problems with it because they said I need the iOS to be downloaded, and I don't understand.
Yep, that's a very common issue with iOS. So you're changing fields. What type of field are you in now, and you're thinking of moving into IT from where?
No. Well, right now, basically, I'm changing fields because I'm like middle age. So maybe I don't know if I want to be an analyst, but I work with clients right now. I'm on social service.
I like the idea of what you're thinking is that one of the best, probably the fastest moving fields that you'll run into are related to cloud and related to networking. And one of the ones that you mentioned here is being able to sort of understand more about networks, build networks, troubleshoot networks, plug in routers, switches, dynamic routing, the whole mix of those things. It's an incredibly complex field, but it is also a very lucrative field and plenty of jobs out there to do networking. You mentioned GNS. GNS is an emulation. Really, it's more of a virtualization software for routers. A technology that allows you to run different manufacturers' routing software and switching software in a service. As a service in a server that you're using. One of the things that you will find, though, and what GNS3 uses, because it is this virtualized system, it is using or requires that you use the actual code to be able for it to work properly. So for it to virtualize a Cisco router, it has to have Cisco router code. Cisco router code is a product of Cisco, it is copyrighted Cisco, it is licensed by Cisco, and it's not shipped with GNS3. GNS3 doesn't ship with the software you need to run it. You have to get that software somewhere else, which is kind of the catch-22 here is I want to be able to learn Cisco routing and switching, but I don't have a Cisco router or switch, so let's do it virtually, except to do it virtually, I need Cisco switch and router software to be able to do that. Well, if I had it, I probably just used the router or switch that I had to be able to make that happen. And I realize there's more flexibility with a virtualized system. What I would recommend you do is not to use GNS3 for something like this at the beginning. I think that using a free tool that does almost everything you would need it to do at the very beginning, like Packet Tracer, which is a product from Cisco, is a free product. It does not require iOS. All of the routing and switching functionality is built into it. It is an emulator for routers and switches. So it's not a real router or real switch software, but it sure feels like a real router and real switch software. It's about as close as you can get for free without going into the complexities required for GNS3. So my recommendation is to Google up and grab Packet Tracer from Cisco. That's going to get you 6 months into your trainings before you're ever going to hit a wall with that, and maybe even longer. And by that point, you should have the idea that maybe I should buy a Cisco router or Cisco switch to be able to do that. And then you would have a license that was legitimate that you could use towards something like GNS3 if you wanted to. Although Cisco has their own flavor of this, which is their virtual router software. It's viral. Is something that you can also run from Cisco that takes it to the next level. But there's more complexities associated with that. I would recommend starting with Packet Tracer. It's great entry level. It comes with everything you need. It's a turnkey system. give that a shot and see if that doesn't get you over that hump.
Okay, just to interject, the reason why I would love to do what you're saying, and it sounds very interesting, but I'm in a situation because, like I'm taking classes now, my professor's like, oh, they want us to do it, the GSM3, and I had problems. I did the BIOS, but then now what comes up, they're saying like, oh, you have to upload the iOS, and I'm kind of in a twist and a turn with that because this is what they're asking me to do, and this is what my professor. Otherwise, I would do exactly what you said because it sounds much easier and less complex. But I was just wondering.
You can work with GNS3. You're going to have to find iOS software. The only way to legitimately use GNS3 is if you have a legitimate license of iOS that you can find to use, which means you would need to purchase hardware to be able to have that, although some people can purchase the software individually, but that's very large organizations. GNS3 is very functional, but as you have found, it is not simple to get up and running. It's kind of a pain to get up and running, quite honestly. I'm kind of preaching to the choir. You've already seen this. You already know that it's difficult. I can't recommend that you go find an iOS on the internet somewhere and download it. They certainly have things like that out there, but there's also licensing that Cisco requires from this as well. You might want to consider working with someone who already has a Cisco router, already has a Cisco switch, and doing that. There are some Cisco routers and switches available very inexpensively on eBay as packages for people that are working on these kinds of things. Otherwise, you're sort of working along the dark sides of the internet to try to find something that you can download. And even then, you don't know if you're getting really a legitimate iOS. There are security concerns associated with that. Just be very careful about where you download it from.
Oh, okay. Sounds great. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
It's a great thing to use. It's a fantastic tool. Once you get it running, you've got a real router and a real switch that you're effectively working with in this virtual environment. There's a lot to learn. And once you get past the hump of getting it running, you may find that you're off to the races.
So with this, like now, like my studies, it seems like I'm doing GNS3 I have like different couple of classes with networking, with cyber. I was just trying to say, with that background, what type of field that I can get into that would be, worthwhile? I mean, is it analyst, or I'm just trying to also kind of research what I can do with all this knowledge.
Whenever you're moving from one type of job into another, one type of role into another, it's a challenge. You almost have to start at the bottom of technology and work your way up. If you're in a large geographical environment with lots of companies, you may be able to get into that entry-level help desk. An entry-level network operations center, or NOC, is a good place to go, especially if you get some of this networking knowledge that you're working on. A NOC is a very good option. Or as I mentioned earlier, we were talking about SOCs, the Security Operations Center, and being able to get into those entry-level roles, whatever they happen to be. I don't think it matters which one of those you get into at an entry level, as long as it's a type of technology that you like. The network side of things tends to be the most flexible because you can almost go in whatever direction you want after that. Although these days, security pays very well. And if you can find a job in a security operations center with that knowledge, that's a great place to go and a great place to start. So you'll have to start at the bottom. But one great thing about IT is you can move up very fast, and there's really no ceiling. You can keep moving up and keep moving up and keep moving up in IT. And those six-figure numbers that people make in IT are real things, but you have to put in the time and be able to move up through those particular jobs to be able to get to that point.
Right. I'm in the New York area. I'm in New York, so I hear that that's supposed to be a good place for this population.
That is a great place. Plenty of opportunity for those entry-level technical jobs. Plenty of options for help desk, NOC, SOC type positions. You should be able in these very large companies, especially these international companies, to find those types of jobs available.
hmm Do you think I need? Do I need more than an undergraduate? Because I know there's like associates, undergraduate, and then there's some people go for PH. So I don't know if I really need all of that. You know, right now I have an undergraduate, so definitely, and some. I was just trying to figure out how much education would I need to always want to move up.
This is a common question, and it's not a single answer for everybody. What I would recommend you do, and it kind of goes into more than we have time for here, but I created a video just for this. It's a video called How to Get a Job, an IT Job Without Experience. And that is the real key, is trying to make that happen. The How to Get an IT Job Without Experience, it's a 30-minute video, but it is chock full of what you need to do. And I cover education, formal education. I cover certifications. I cover practical experience. And then I cover the topic of knowing people who already work in that particular role or with that particular company. So those are the 4 elements I speak about in that video, because it is one of these top topics that people go through. And I go through these scenarios with a formal education. Do you need an IT degree to get a job in IT? Spoiler alert, you do not. Do you need a technical degree to get a job in IT? You don't. But there are advantages and disadvantages if you do or if you don't. And you need to know what those are. And I detail that in this video.
Right, that's good, because I already like formal education plus starting to prepare studying for the A+ and stuff like that. I'm starting studying for that, so I'm trying to do a combination already.
Have a look at that. I think that video will help answer some of those questions. And if it doesn't, call back on Thursday. We'll go through more of them.
Okay, and I have to find out what time on Thursday. Is there a way I can find out the time on Thursday?
You always go to my calendar, professormesser.com/calendar.
Very good. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. You're awesome.
Thank you for the call. Best of luck.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
That's one of those things, though. I think that there's so many different moving parts in the chat room. People asking, can I just get in with a degree? You could. You don't have to have all 4 of those elements to be able to get a job in IT. But the more of them you have, the more you can kind of slide over in the interview. Like, I got all this stuff. How about that? What do you think? You know, some people hiring may not want all 4 of those. They may want you to just have the basics so that they can train you as you go and then pay you less than somebody who is more knowledgeable, which is a perfectly reasonable business objective, but you have to find the right job for you to be able to do that. Back to the phones. Thanks for holding for so long. 312 area code. There it goes. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, my name's Marcel Alveda, and I'm calling from Chicago.
Thanks for calling, Hazel. What can we do for you?
I just basically wanted to know, like, how long I should take for this CompTIA A1 exam, the 1001.
Are you asking about how long does it take to study for this exam?
Yeah, how long do you recommend? Because I'm currently studying it, and I'm in school for it right now, and I was looking through your videos for help.
It really ranges quite a bit. I have had people come to my site. They have gone through the videos very quickly. Granted, they had a foundation in this knowledge already. They spent 2 weeks kind of summarizing everything they needed to know, and then they went and took the exam and they passed it. That is an unusual case, but people have done that. I've had other cases, and I'll take mine as a very good example. I had to study for a certification exam in my last job that was a security certification exam. It took me months to study for that, and I did that as my job. That was what I did all day, every day. I worked in that role, and I had to take my own certification exam from my own company that I worked for. And it took me months to study for that because I really like to go through every single topic and really understand it and make sure I knew what was going to be asked of me on the exam before I ever sat down to take that exam. And maybe there was a little more pressure on me as well, because you don't want to fail a certification exam as a technical person who's representing the product that you're taking the exam on. So I wanted to be really sure I didn't walk out of there with a fail, or else that might have been a really bad situation. So for me, it takes 6 months before I'm ever ready to take exams like this. I think probably the average for most people is probably about 3 months.
And like I'm in school for like network engineering, and I really don't know what type of job should I get. Like, and I live in the Chicago area, and I was looking for like some starting jobs, basically.
Networking's a great field to be in. You've got great flexibility. You're learning a lot about the packets, about routing, about switching, about the infrastructure. You kind of jump from that and go a lot of different places. And if you get that knowledge, if you're getting specifically a network engineering or network type degree, then a network operations center is a perfect place to start in, because you'll be using all of that knowledge right out of the gate. Look for those first of all, but don't limit yourself to that. If you find an entry-level help desk, you find a security operations center help desk position, take those jobs, because you will eventually move into networking or operating systems or security or whatever interests you. And it probably is going to change throughout your career anyway. I started doing kind of hardware. I moved into operating systems. I then went into networking. I then went into security. So it's never, ever one thing throughout your entire career. It probably will be multiple things. Find the thing that interests you the most. Go after that to begin with. Just don't limit yourself.
Yeah, I was interested in filling out some applications in a hospital for help desk.
Yep.
And they said you had to have like some associate's degree, and I currently do not have mine. And I'm going to school for it right now. And yeah, so I was like, it was kind of tricky.
I'll point you back to that same video I talked about in that previous call about how to get a job in IT with no experience, where I talk about building a spreadsheet. You do need to do some legwork before you start putting these resumes into these employers. Build out a spreadsheet. Find out what are the requirements that are they looking for. Are they looking for formal education? Do they want a 2-year? Do they want a 4-year? Do they want a specific kind of 4-year degree? You need to document all of these things. You need to know if they want a certain set of certifications. You want to know if they are looking for a particular kind of knowledge in an operating system or an application. You need to make sure you have a spreadsheet of all of these things, not only so you know what is out there and you kind of get a feel for some of the things you need to learn, but you might also see some things that are the same through all these jobs. You might find in your area, everybody seems to want me to have this Microsoft certification or this AWS certification or this Network Plus certification. You know, those are things you're going to start to see. And you'll start to see maybe a lot of people do want an associate's degree, so it makes sense for you to go and invest the time into getting that. But unless you put together that spreadsheet, you'll never know. So make sure you really do your groundwork. It's not a one-time thing either. You're constantly updating the spreadsheet. You need to have a very good feel for the jobs in your area and what people are looking for, and it's different in different geographies as well.
So you would, what type of resources would you use yourself, like LinkedIn?
I absolutely do. In fact, I'll point back to that video again where I talk about how do you get some experience if you have none? How do you have something you can talk about? What would you create a home lab of if you're working on networking? And I give some lists. I give 3 different examples in that video of different home labs you can build out so that you can then have stories to talk about in your interview. I talk about some of the certifications that people are looking for. I talk about that 4th element, which we really haven't talked about, which is somebody who works there, which is an incredibly powerful element. If they have a personal connection to you, it doesn't have to be somebody that you're spending, nights with and going out to have drinks with, just a professional associate that you have seen or work with or go to the same user group meetings. And you could say, well, I already know Joe in accounting or Fred in IT, and we've talked a lot about this position. Now you've got another set of people and connections within that company. Oh, you know Joe? That's okay. That's good. I'm going to put a check mark, because if you know Joe, there's a personal connection, and now we can think of putting you there to be able to have that piece available. And I talk about getting your LinkedIn up to date. I just did a video and released it a couple weeks ago on why your resume keeps getting rejected. 5 reasons why your resume keeps getting rejected. I talk a lot about LinkedIn and that as well. Make sure you check out that video too.
sir. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I appreciate the call. Thanks so much. You know, it's never one thing. It's always a combination of different things to put together. And it's a really good way to kind of piece together what you need to know when you walk into that interview. You should already have stories ready to go. There should be a whole grouping of stories. I set up a home lab with a firewall and an IPS, and you'll never believe what I found coming into my network. There's a whole 15 minutes of a conversation in an interview where you could talk about all the things you found. I created a report on them. Here's the report I created from my IPS. Now you've got charts and graphs. It's really just a button in the IPS you push, and it creates all these reports. But you've got it. Like, this was coming into my, I found a machine on my network that had malware. Here's another thing talking out to command and control. Here's somebody trying to break into my network. These are great things that you could always share in the middle of an interview. They're like, oh, this person has some knowledge with IPS, except you've never had a job working with an IPS before, but you've had effectively a job as an IPS administrator on your own network. Wasn't paid, but actually it might pay you back later because now you've got a story. Back to the phones. I'll go to the 251 area code. Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from? Caller. Are you there, caller? Hi, caller. Are you there? Say something, caller. Are you on mute, caller? Unmute yourself and say hi. Are you there? You are not there. I'll just pot you down that. In the chat room, somebody mentioned, made up the stat, 60% of jobs are filled via personal reference. It's more than that. At least in my particular experience, it's more than that. Throughout my career, I probably had 15 different IT jobs. Sometimes those jobs were, I moved from inside of a company from a help desk tech 1 to help desk tech 2. So we're not talking about enormous moves in some cases, but in some cases it was enormous moves. I moved from company to company. I moved from an IT position into a systems engineer position. It just depended on the place where I was going. In those 15 jobs, the first job I got, I didn't know anybody there. Still today, I'm not sure why they hired me, but they did. Every job after that, I knew someone who worked there. The rest of the 14 jobs I ever got in my IT career, I knew someone who worked at that company. Not always somebody I worked with, maybe an acquaintance, maybe somebody I knew who I visited as part of my old job, and I delivered them a cable. But I'd been to the building. I'd been up to the 4th floor. I talked to the IT people. I handed them the cable. I met that person. I asked them questions about what they did here. Do they have open positions? Do you have an application? You know, that's the type of connection you need to make just at the very beginnings. But 14 jobs in my career were jobs with companies where someone I knew worked there. Sometimes in IT, sometimes not in IT. Don't discount that. It's very, very valuable. Let's go back 773. It's Davish calling back. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Hi, Professor. Thank you very much for taking my call.
Thanks for calling.
Sir, thank you. Thank you much. I have a question, sir. If you, for example, produce or have an idea to enhance the capability of, say, Google emails or any kind of email, how would you go about it? Would they accept, or can you be able to talk to them, say, I have this idea which will enhance your email for such and such, give it more capability to do more for users? Would it be accepted to Google? Or, how would you negotiate such a thing?
Well, I guess it would depend on what the enhancement was, because there are a number of Google Mail enhancements that are available to download as things that you can extend to Google Mail. So inside of my browser for Google Mail, I have, in my particular case in Chrome, there are additional pieces that I can use, additional things I can download from Google to enhance the functionality of Google Mail, for example. So I have a plugin, an extension, they call it in Chrome. It's called other things in other browsers, but I have an extension that will allow me to send PGP and receive PGP encrypted messages inside of Google Mail because Google Mail doesn't do that by default. So Google has extended their mail platform to allow people to put these extensions into the Google Mail to allow it to do these extra things. Not everything can be done with extensions, but that's a really good way to do it. And not every manufacturer allows their product to be extended in that way. When you get into enhancing or having feature requests for products, it becomes, in some cases, kind of a legally gray or legally difficult area to negotiate or to be able to move around in. I have worked with companies before that specifically would not accept any type of feature request that extended or added new features to the product. It had to be something that was already inside the product, because the lawyer said, if you accept somebody's free idea off the street, hey, you know what would be neat? It'd be neat if that screen was green and had a button that said, go get it. That would really enhance the capabilities of that product. And then you put that into the product, the person who made the recommendation has some legal means to come back to you and say, hey, you're making tons of money off of my invention and you now owe me money. So there's whenever you get lawyers involved, there's always going to be problems associated with something like that. But that's one of the things you have to kind of think about and watch out for, not only as someone who has these ideas, but somebody who has the product. Now, fortunately, like in Google's case, the one you gave, there are extensions that you can create. You have to be a developer. You have to register it with Google. They have to put it on they have to check it out. They have to make sure it's safe. And then they'll put it on their Google front end, their extension store, so that you can go in and download it and other people can use it. But there are methods to be able to make that happen. It's just you have to find the right combination of those to be able to do it.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much for the answer. One question I have is, if you set up what they call a virtual server environment or virtual networks in your system, would that enhance your safety capability for people who try to hack to your system? I mean, virtual things like hypervisor and stuff like that. Would that give you one more wall to cross, one more burden to cross to get to your system or do any kind of damage?
Well, it certainly could. I guess it would depend on how it was implemented, but one very common implementation of end user protection for applications is more of a containment method. It's a strategy that a lot of companies will use where they will effectively put applications into their own sandbox in your existing operating system, effectively virtualizing the entire environment. And that one application is now talking out to the internet. If something was to, in some way, take advantage, use an exploit against a vulnerability for that application and gain access to your system, they would be stuck in that contained little sandbox, and they would not be able to get out of that sandbox. So there are people that are using that on these end devices as a way to help protect applications. It's a perfectly viable method of protecting applications. Again, nothing is perfect, but it does provide some additional safety for some applications and being able to use it that way.
Thank you, Professor. Also, I read somewhere that the companies that produce operating system, they always leave a windows for themselves to be able to get to your system, to observe what you do. And how much do they usually do that? Can they be able to, for example, see what you're doing? Because I remember with NT4, they had an agreement, they call it NG3 or something, that they could be able to release what you're doing or observe what you're doing in case maybe law enforcement department needed it. Is this true? Do they still have the same same procedure?
This is something that's kind of a controversial subject within the industry because for things like the phone lines, there is a well-established method for law enforcement to be able to gain access to phone records and in some cases to be able to access live telephone conversations. It's a well-established, and has been around for a very long time method of being able to do this through the existing legal system. Where things start to break down is what we have found in today's technology, where everything's encrypted. You've got the signal instant messaging, you've got PGP, you've got HTTPS encryption that we're using between servers and clients. And now it becomes difficult for law enforcement and people who do have a legitimate need to be able to see data. Now they can't look into your phone anymore. They can't look into your network communication anymore. And now there's this push and pull in the industry where law enforcement would like a backdoor. They would like to be able to gain access to someone's encrypted data, whereas the people who have done anything with encryption will tell you, once you do that, the encryption is worthless. And if you did that, people would just change to some other kind of encryption, or they would not use that particular method of communication. So this is the challenge that is going to be one that we constantly run into for the foreseeable future, because it is one that the bad guys try to stay one step ahead of law enforcement. Law enforcement has legitimate reasons for needing access to this data, but at least in the United States, we have legitimate reasons for not allowing people to have access to our data. Somewhere is there a middle ground? Is there not a middle ground? Who knows? We're going to have to figure that out as we go.
Yes, sir. And also for the ransomware that they are always attack the U.S. system, like recently in Chicago, some of the hospitals were attacked by ransomware, and they had to pay ransom in Bitcoin. How would you, what kind of a language do they use basically? How would they be able to get to a system? Like if they have a Cisco routers and switches, things like that. What languages, what procedures, generally speaking, what you suspect that they might use?
This is one of those situations where I've often told people, as I was a systems engineer for a next generation firewall company, and I would tell people, you can make your firewall very, very secure, but the firewall isn't what's stopping the malware. The users are the people that are getting themselves in the problems they're having. They're creating the holes in the firewall that's allowing the malware in. In similar situation with what happened in Chicago, where, and in fact, all over the country right now, especially with small local and state governments, they're finding these environments that are very open, that are not well secured, that are not patched very well, and they're taking advantage of vulnerabilities on those to be able to embed ransomware and then ask for lots of money from these organizations. It is one that it's not about the router. It's not about the switch. It's not about the firewall. It's not about the operating system. It's not about the email. It's about all of these things together. It's a combination of technologies that we have to use to be able to stop this. And it's this, you'll see a constant race in our industry that as soon as we find something really bad like this ransomware, we're finding ways to mitigate the ransomware, at which point the ransomware authors find ways around our mitigation and the race continues again. It's a constant give and take all the way until it never ends. I don't know why I'm saying until. There is no until. It just keeps going and we keep fighting it, and it's a war that we have to keep winning. Each time it's raised to another level, we have to find another way around it. It's not something that's going to go away.
Thank you, Professor. I really appreciate your lovely, classes, and thank you very much. I always follow you, and I enjoy your knowledge. You really are a source.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir. You have a great.
Thank you. Same to you. I appreciate the calls. That's very nice of you to say. One of the things I always struggle with these ransomware situations, and one of the things that this is where you get into technology and people have no idea how the technology works. That, in fact, they're talking about in the chat room, they think the way to make ransomware stop is you make it illegal for people to pay the ransom. So that's, why didn't I think of that? This problem solved. What a brilliant idea. Let's go back to the phones. 251 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, my name is William, and I'm calling from Alabama.
Thanks for calling, William. What can we do for you?
I'm a fan of your videos. I watch them, as, support for my course that I'm going through.
Great.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with My Computer Career.
I've heard the name somewhere in the the comings and goings for sure.
Okay, well, I'm just a newbie at this. Have no experience, no prior experience, and I have until March to complete 1001, 1002, and I'm gonna try to shoot for the Network Plus. And I have no prior experience, and since I have until March, I was, really in shambles, not knowing what steps I should take to, go forth and study. I was trying to shoot for 10 hours a day for a month for the 1001. Do you think this sounds reasonable?
Wow, that's a long time in a day. I'd be in very bad shape after a week of that. I'd have to start drinking heavily or something. I'd need sedation after 10 hours a day. But if you can stand it, that's something that it's not. People do that in training classes all the time. They go in the morning, you're hands-on, you're going through lectures, you're doing labs, you get through a training class, you go at the end of the day and you do that for a week. You just can't keep it up for very long periods of time, it seems. But that's a perfectly reasonable way to study if you're one of those people who can do that. Absolutely. Your goal, of course, is just to make sure you're really capturing and really understanding each one of those topics as you go through it.
Okay. Well, I was just, kind of trying to figure out a way. I was going to go through your course. I was going to go through Mike Mayer's. I was going to go through, the supplementary courses that my school is giving me.
Good.
And I was just going to, run through it all.
Good. The one topic, the one thing I would say is a tip then, especially if you use multiple resources, multiple books, multiple videos, practice exams, hands-on, whatever it happens to be, make sure you're always referencing back to the exam objectives. Make sure that you can, if you're going to watch my videos on a topic and watch somebody else's videos on a topic and read a book on the topic, make sure you're going to the same topic idea and the same exam objective for each one of those so that you're able to sync all of those up, because different books put things in different orders, different video courses put things in different orders. Just make sure you're able to do that. Otherwise, you're all over the place.
Okay. Do you believe with this method for as I said, 10 hours a day for each, 1001, 1002 and Network Plus, do you think that would be, enough? Or, because you said 3 months or 6 months, and I don't have that much time because I'm enrolled in a school.
It really depends on the individual. Some people learn faster than others. Some people have more time during the day to study than others. I don't have 10 hours a day to study, so it's going to take me a long time. If you have 10 hours a day to study, you may find it goes by very quickly. You may find the topics are something you're comfortable with. It may be topics you've already had familiarity with in the past. So things may go faster for you than other people as well. Everybody's a little bit different on those. You're doing the right thing. You're using different study materials, which I think speeds things along because you can get people explaining it in different ways from a book, from videos, from hands-on, from Q&A, and it kind of goes in, it kind of is a faster way to learn as you step through it. That might be reasonable to you. The only way you're going to know is if you track it in the exam objectives, and you'll be able to see at the end of 1 week, how far did you get through the exam objectives? Did you get through a quarter of it? Did you get through a tenth of it? You'll be able to make a determination at that point.
Okay. And another thing was, I looked at a couple blogs and they said, A plus is starting to go out of style and, people are not starting to get hired. Is that true?
Well, if I was a blog writer and I wanted people to read my blog, I would probably write something controversial like that anyway. The best way to know whether a particular certification is in vogue, is something that employers are looking for, is to ask the employers. Get on LinkedIn, get on Dice, get on Indeed.com. Look for those IT help desk jobs, look for network operations center jobs, look for security operations center jobs, and see what they're asking for. If none of them are asking for an A+, then maybe you're right. Maybe A+ is something that nobody will ever use again. But I suspect what you'll find is that everybody's asking for A+, because that's what I'm seeing in my particular area, is everybody likes to see the A+ in those types of skills. There's nothing else that kind of replaces it. So I think once you do that research, I think you'll see there's plenty of people wanting those. I never trust people telling me what people don't want from me. I'll make that decision. I'll figure out what people want or don't want. I don't need somebody gatekeeping for me in the IT industry because, quite honestly, the world is your oyster with IT. There's so many different things you can do and so many places to go. I don't have time to spend listening to negative people. I'd rather surround myself with the people who are more positive.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate the call. Thanks so much. Okay. Thank you.
It's one of those, for some reason, I think it's not just an IT thing. I think it's everywhere that occasionally you'll just find those people that are very, very negative. They'll be in your workplace. They'll be on the internet. They'll be just everywhere. And you just have to filter them out. Go away, negative people. There's way too much positivity here. There's way too many things to do in IT. If I had just listened to everybody who said, no, you can't do that, I would have never gotten anywhere in my career. Back to phone calls, 912. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes, sir. I'm actually calling from Florida, but Georgia number, Georgia area code, but I'm in Florida.
Works for me. What can we do for you?
My name's Cole, and my question is, I've been looking over the A+ stuff. I actually currently work for an MSP.
Okay.
I'm a support technician, level 1. Very small MSP, but very good place to start out.
Great.
My question is, I've been going over the stuff to get the A+, and I bought your practice test, and I've taken 2 of them on the 1001. I've consistently missed about 25 questions, so I'm not exactly there yet, but I haven't started looking over the Core 2 stuff. So my question is, would you recommend going ahead and finishing up the 1001, the Core 1 stuff, going ahead and taking that test, then coming back and studying for the Core 2 and take that later? Or should I just go straight through and try to take both of them around the same time?
I would strongly recommend you take them one at a time, that you bite off just the exam objectives for one exam, learn everything you need to know for that one exam, study for that one exam, take the exam for that one exam, pass it, and then you can throw all that out and completely shift gears into the second exam. The 2 exams, 1001 and 1002, have very, very, very little overlap. So you're not missing anything by separating them out. If anything, you're increasing the chances you're going to pass both of them by separating them out.
Okay. Yeah, that was my question. Like I said, I've taken both the tests and missed about 25 on each one, so I'm close. I'm close to being able to pass it. But yeah, that was just something I was wondering about. And I think it's pretty much my only question.
All right. That's great. I appreciate the call. Thanks.
And thank you very much for everything you do. It's been very good.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Cole. Best of luck. You know, one of the things you need to know when you're ready to take those exams, you don't get any gimme questions on the A+. And I think that's what Cole probably found in that particular case. The questions are in some cases involved, and they're never asking you a trivia question. You're not going to get a question of what does DSL stand for? You're never going to get a question like that. It's always a question that builds on something else. So that's one of those things you have to be ready for. Don't walk into the exam thinking you're going to have a bunch of definition questions and a lot of trivia. It's just not going to happen. Let's go back to the phones. Thanks for holding for so long. 210. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name's Sophia. I'm from San Antonio.
Thanks for calling.
I have a question. It's one of your pop questions, actually.
Okay.
I don't know exactly when it was posted, but I'll read it out loud. Me and my networking majoring friend are in a heated argument about it, so maybe you can clarify it for us.
I can't wait. I hope this is not a question I completely messed up. So let's find out how badly I did.
All right. It says, which of the following would be the most common way to connect a large number of devices on a corporate network to the internet? Your choices are VPN, quality of service, VLAN, NAT, network address translation, MAC address, or just give everyone their own smartphone. The correct answer is NAT, but my networking friend really, really strongly believes it's a VPN. I didn't know if there was a way you could counter attack that and explain why it was NAT.
Let's find that particular question. We're going to break down that particular one. Do you happen to know what day that was from?
I know it was on the front page. It's on the first page of your pop questions for
Okay.
A plus Core 1. So it's probably like maybe 5 or 6 down.
Gotcha.
I believe.
Well, let's kind of break down those different things that I listed there. So we've got the question itself is asking about a big corporate network. In some cases, I'm going to expand on what I'm thinking, my thought process of this particular question. In many cases on a corporate network, you've got hundreds, in some cases, thousands of devices on a corporate network. And you now need to connect all thousands of these people to the internet. How are you going to do that? How are you going to get them communication out to Google, out to Microsoft.com, out to Reddit.com, or wherever their highly motivated internet browsing takes them in being able to do that? My approach to that question was to have people think about, how do you do that? How do you functionally take tens of thousands of devices and somehow have them communicate out a single internet connection and being able to communicate? And network address translation, as you saw in the answer, that's what I put as that's how you make that happen. It is a type of communication that converts the network addresses, in some cases the port numbers as well. That's why you'll also hear it referred to as PAT, or port address translation. Technically, I guess it works either way, but it is a type of network address translation that allows people to do that and communicate through those particular network connections. Let's go through what the wrong answers were, and I'll give you my idea or my ideas of why that particular answer was wrong. So let's start with the first wrong answer. Which one was that?
It was VPN.
VPN, virtual private network, which is a great way for people on the internet to be able to connect back to a corporate network. We're certainly very familiar with that at this point, because as soon as we were all locked down, the IT people were scrambling to get everybody up on the VPN so that they could all connect back to the corporate network, which is the other direction. It's sort of, you're out on the internet, and now you need some way to gain access to the internal resources. You need to use a VPN to be able to make that happen. Interestingly enough, the VPN also doing a NAT to be able to make that happen, but that's sort of outside the scope of this. The question was more about the people on the inside talking to the internet. People on the inside aren't going to use a VPN to talk out to Google, because Google is not a VPN endpoint. So that's why VPN would not be the right answer for that particular question. What's the next wrong answer on that list?
QoS, quality of service.
Quality of service. QoS is a fantastic technology if you need to be able to prioritize different types of traffic flows on the network. Very commonly used with voice over IP, so you can be on a phone call talking to people on the network. At the same time, the person next to you could be downloading the latest Linux distribution that is gigabytes in size. And even though they're downloading these massive files across the internet, your voice conversation doesn't have any impact. There's nothing wrong going with your voice conversation at all, because quality of service puts a priority on voice communication over the file transfer that's going on, and the file transfer will never cause a problem with your voice communication because of that quality of service that you've enabled. Great technology, has nothing to do with how people are able to use the internet from inside the private network, however. Next on our list.
Okay. VLAN, virtual local area network.
So VLANs are great for segmenting different networks on our internal network. Great security functionality if you want to put the marketing department on one network, the data center on one network, shipping and receiving on one network, and the IT department on another network. They can all be on different VLANs, and the people who are on those VLANs can't talk to anybody on another VLAN unless you have a router that allows them to talk to each other, and in some cases a firewall that would allow them to talk to each other. Great for segmentation, but it does not allow or enable any type of internet connectivity. It's more of a segmentation functionality within your own existing network. So that would not be the right answer either. So the last wrong answer is?
MAC address.
MAC address. So MAC address would be your physical address of a network card. Commonly, it's that hexadecimal address that we see listed there. MAC addresses are commonly used by switches to be able to send traffic from one device to another, but the MAC address itself is not something that is sent over the internet. In fact, it doesn't go past your local router. So that is not something that enables a lot of people to communicate out over the internet either. So everybody got a kind of a bonus question today on communicating out over the network. That's why NAT would be the right answer, and that's why VPN would not be the best answer in that particular case.
I appreciate you explaining it. I'm taking my test tomorrow, so trying to get all my networking stuff down before I go in there.
Best of luck, Sophia.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks for calling. That's always good. If you can step through a question and you know why certain questions are right and why the other questions are wrong, I think that's a key piece right at the end. When you get in there, that's the key piece of this in making that work. VLAN might help minimize ransomware attacks if the VLAN was segmented enough to prevent communication to other parts of the network. This is the problem we run into in a lot of people's networks, is that the inside of the network is very squishy and very open, and they've got this strong wall around the outside to the internet, but everything on the inside is just easy to get to. So companies are working very hard at segmenting the network so that only trusted traffic is sent through the network. And that's why the zero trust model has gotten such a huge emphasis. If you're interested in finding what are people doing these days to prevent ransomware, to mitigate these situations, it's zero trust. So zero trust is becoming the big thing on our networks. Lots of great articles written about zero trust right now. Everybody's all about that. Let's go to the 206 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello. This is Abby calling you from Virginia.
Thanks for calling. What's your question?
Oh, my question is, thank you, Professor, just, for everything. Really, I love your video.
Thank you.
The study group, everything. Really appreciate. Thank you for that. Also, I have some documents from you, just, some practice questions. So my question is, recently I'm working as a tier 2 and partially tier 3 in a bigger, enterprise level of, foundation in the country. So supporting the user both, computer, hardware and the software troubleshooting network in the AV as an IT specialist. Also to the higher level. Currently, my foundation is migrating everything to the Azure. So in the Office 365, Azure part, Azure AD, I'm supporting on that level.
Great.
My question is, I'm in the confusion that, so having of this experience, 5 or 6 years experience, I have in this even more. So currently they are expecting, to the higher level of this tier 3. Do you advise me to take, A+, or really just, what is your advice on moving to the, I'm confused, really just,
Well, you've got a couple of huge advantages right now for your career. One is that you're in a good location for a good combination of things is working for you. Your location works for you and your Azure knowledge works for you. Both of those are highly sought after in that Virginia, DC area. So people just love that particular set of skills. And Microsoft is doing amazing things with Azure. They're getting huge amounts of market. People are buying it. It's effectively Windows in the cloud with all the advantages of managing Windows and Active Directory and all of the email and all of the tools that everybody's accustomed to doing, but it's in the cloud. On top of that are all the security tools that come with Azure, of the, so you're combining a lot of interesting technologies that already existed with Windows, and you're sort of taking them to the next level with the Azure side. Those are great skills. I don't necessarily think that A+ is probably the best fit for what you need to do in the next step. I think it's probably a good idea to maybe look at what Microsoft is offering for their Azure certifications to see what a good next step might be. And maybe it deals with more automation. Maybe you'd like to do more on the security side with Azure. Maybe it's just a broader cloud-based. Maybe now you diversify. Maybe you get some Amazon certification. It depends on what employers in your area are looking for, or maybe what your existing employer is looking for to be able to move you into a different role. Those technologies right now are just red hot. Everybody wants Azure cloud. They want to be able to have skill sets that can automate, secure, and manage those environments. That's a great place to be. I don't necessarily think that A+ is a good fit. Is a good cohesive add-on to that. I think perhaps having something that's more cloud-based might be a better solution. But in the end, it depends on what employers are looking for, and it depends on what you want to do. I was working in networking, and I wanted to be in security. So I moved into the security side. I didn't do more networking. I really shifted gears and went on the security side. You might want to shift gears too, and it's also going to depend on what employers are looking for. This may be time for you to maybe make that spreadsheet of what jobs are out there and what people would like you to have.
Yeah, thank you. Just, the confusion, really, my company, the foundation, the direction is migrating and more automation, Azure, cloud computing. All these are the new modernization plan in the next year. So they are expecting, so we are already migrated everything to Azure Office 365. We are working on that, is Exchange Admin Center part. So the confusion is really in the future, the A+ is expected from my side, from job market. Also, frankly, as you suggest, even having of this confusion, I started in the last 3 months, preparing myself for Azure Fundamental, Azure, as
good
in the team side, for, as a team's communication technology side. I'm working and studying on that. So thank you very much. So really appreciate. Maybe how do you relate to the issue is in the Azure? I heard someone is asking is the cloud side, the security part. One of the issues we are really working recently is as identity access management related to that.
Yep.
Azure is, we need, secure all those things. So how do you advise me? What about the security plus?
I think Security Plus would be a great step. In fact, it's rare that I would tell someone, in fact, it's rare lately that I tell people to jump to the 601 of Security Plus. But if your scope is Azure Security, it's doing the IAM, it's doing the CASB, it's using the third-party tools on the security side, you might want to look at some of the things that are offered in the newer Security Plus certification that's due to be released this month, which is the 601. The disadvantage in that is going to be the first books arrive in January. The rest of the stuff's not going to be rolled out till March. You're not going to see a lot of study tools for that, but there's much more of an emphasis in cloud security on the 601 than there is on the 501. Although what I think you'll find is that a lot of the things you've already done with Azure are already listed in the 601. You've already done them. You've already gone through the process of learning all these technologies that are only just talked about at the high level on Security Plus. But it's especially in your particular area in Virginia and DC area, Security Plus is almost required to be able to move from one job to the other. That's probably a better bet for you than getting something like an A+, I would think.
Thank you. Do you have the 601, the new version?
Nobody does.
The
study materials don't exist yet because the exam is so brand new. It's so brand new, I don't even think the exam's available to take. We know it's going to be November. As of yesterday, they had not released a date yet. But the first books you're going to see are probably going to be November. I'm hoping to have my course notes out by December. That's going to be kind of a push. But December, January, it's so new, and when an exam just comes out, it takes about 3 to 6 months to finally see those things happening. So it's going to be a while before you start to see those. But you will see 601 materials from me. My course notes will be out before the end of the year, beginning of next year. The videos will start coming out at that point. So a whole lot of things happen. I'm almost done building the entire course at this point. It's been going on for months. It'll be going on for months after this. But that will happen. They'll all suddenly appear on the market after the beginning of the year.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it. Thank you for everything.
I appreciate the call. Best of luck. Sounds like you got exactly the right things in mind. That Azure stuff is just hot right now, especially in the Virginia area. The government is investing heavily in those technologies. They were already doing tons of AWS. The Azure and Microsoft strategy with bringing in the Active Directory and everything else, it's just so smooth. It's like butter. Why wouldn't you do that? And the more people that need Microsoft, it just all fit. It was a very good fit. So they're telling me in the chat room that there is finally a date now for Security Plus on there of the 12th. That would be lovely were that available. Let's see what Security Plus has to say. Did they put that on there? They did. They updated it today. November the 12th is when that exam will be available. And they changed the retirement date as well to be July 31st. So not even July the 12th, all the way through July, practically August to take the 501. So you've got some options. That's a big ramp. So for those of you not familiar with this, they bring out a new version of the exam. They don't get rid of the old one. The old one sticks around usually for 6 months. In this case, it's sticking around for about almost 8 months. Probably a lot of that is based around what's happening in the world, the fact that we're at home. It took a while to get Security Plus out. They've pushed Network Plus to be later in 2021 because of that and other things as well. So that's just sort of the way things are going. Thank you for the update, chat room. So now we know it's November the 12th is when the drop date is for that new exam. I still recommend from vast majority of you, don't take it. Don't take it on November the 12th. Don't even think about taking it at all. It is 30% larger. It's 50% of it is new content. It's a massive undertaking. So much easier to take the 501 and you get exactly the same certification. There's no downside to taking the 501. So until July 31st, you could still take the 501 to be able to do that. We knew it was going to be July. Now it's just the end of July, which is great. So you've got plenty of time if you're working on Security Plus. We'll talk more about that in the Security Plus study group at the end of the month. When is that? On the 18th? I don't want to get my dates wrong this month. If I go back to the calendar at professormesser.com/calendar, the 18th is my Security Plus study group. We'll certainly talk more about that in the after shows as well. So people who are interested in that can always learn more about that. Well, we've gone through our A+ study group at the beginning of this where I asked you questions. You got to ask me some questions today, and we did overtime today with the phone calls. Thank you so much for your calls. We had some great calls today. We went through all kinds of different topics, just phenomenal. Could not ask for anything better than that. Come on back in a couple days. This is Tuesday. On Thursday, we're doing another one of these for the Core 2 exams. The questions already locked in. They're already ready to go. Let's see if we can make something challenging and get you some knowledge in your brain for the 1002 exam. I think that would help everybody. We appreciate you being here this time. Check back on the calendar. If you're watching this in the replay for our next live event, you can find it at professormesser.com/calendar. And thank you for being here. We will see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everyone.